Thank you for your patience. We're waiting for one more counselor to come in. And we're ready to go. Welcome. I would now like to call the September 19th, 2023 Longmont City Council Study Session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It can also be viewed at the longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have a roll call, please, Dawn?
Absolutely. Mayor Peck?
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring?
Here.
Councilmember Martin? Here. Councilmember McCoy? Present. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Waters? Here. Councilmember Yarbrough? Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So anyone that wishes to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call public invited to be heard. And this is only open, first call is open to Longmont residents and city employees. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes and we need your name and address. I would like to make a motion at this time I move to amend tonight's agenda to give a short update on the Front Range Passenger Rail District project before we go to motions to direct the city manager. Second. Are there any discussion? I know. Let's vote. So that passes unanimously. Thank you, Council. The reason I'm doing this is that the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board is, I'm on the district board, and it is a rail project to go from Fort Collins, or Pueblo to Fort Collins, or perhaps Trinity to Fort Collins, as we're still working on that district map a little bit. We're moving really fast, and it is the governor's hope that we can get finished with what we need to do and have a vote on the 2024 ballot. So I feel that we need to continually, or start, to get our residents and our council ready for the fact that this is going to be coming. So I want to give you just a fast update as to what we are doing. We are now working with the service delivery plan. The service delivery plan is something that the board is working on, and it is our charge at the board to do many things within that, and it is to choose the operator. Will it be Amtrak? Will it be somebody else? There are so many operators out there that it is the district's job, basically, to choose the operator. And we are also choose the alignment. Where will that rail go? It is also our job to work with the Northwest Corridor with RTD to see if that alignment is going to go in there, to plan the stations. Where are the stations going to go along that alignment, to the easements, the stations that every single stop, who's going to have the stops along the way, what does their station look like, etc. And once we decide upon that plan, then the FRA will work with us to build this rail project. But we don't really have the money to do that, so we applied for a grant called the CIDP, which is the Colorado ID plan. And that grant is for $500,000 so that we can work on our SDP. We'll find out in November whether we get that grant. If we get the grant, according to our trip that we made in Washington, D.C., to speak to our senators and legislators, then FRA is bound and very definitely eager to work with us to get this project done. So the FRA board, I'm going to read my notes because I'm going to forget if I don't. So we need this service delivery plan, or the SDP. It's a very official document that we need to have to show the FRA that we're doing our homework and we're ready to move forward in the federal planning process. It identifies operators, costs, platform operations, cost of either a hydrogen or battery operated engines and alignments, etc. Everything that goes with planning a rail project. I've never done this before, so it's a huge learning curve, but it's fun. Until then, we have a lot of modeling and forecasting we're doing until we can get the SDP plan going. But it's not only the Front Range Passenger Rail District that's working on this. CDOT is working with as a partner. RTD is a partner. And we're having ongoing discussions with all of them about shared services, joint services along the Northwest Corridor line, which is from Union Station to Longmont to connect with this Front Range Passenger Rail District. So our route analysis is ongoing. That is, where is this train going to go? Who wants it to go where? And we have to decide that right away, to be quite honest. The route's likely to be the Northwest Rail line. There are opportunities in the future, if it is not that line, for the Front Range Passenger Rail District to add all additional spurs and platforms for other municipalities to get out to the rail line. The emphasis is on getting the service up and running within a realistic time frame and cost to the voters in the district. I want to talk to you a little bit about the financing. We have 3 different committees. There's a governance committee, there's a planning committee, and there is a finance committee. The finance committee is working to decide how are we going to pay for this. And all of the original funding sources that we've used for years and years are still in there. But the one thing that I mentioned that I am very happy that they put in this is an event fee. They're going to be looking at that to help pay for the construction. CDOT is managing the whole service delivery plan process for us, but the challenges with how they see their role in the overall scope of the project. We made a huge statement about the Front Range Passenger Rail Board understands that the district, per the legislator's direction, is responsible for designing, building, operating, financing, and maintaining the rail line, not CDOT. And to wrap up, there's a lot of stuff to be talked about, but I don't want to take any more time here. The Northwest Rail Corridor is going to have the BNSF work plan and analysis next June. The Front Range Passenger Rail District Board is working to have our service delivery plan next June as well. So at that time, we'll come back with real costs, real alignments, where it's going to go, what it's going to look like, etc. So I'm pretty excited about this. We are moving very fast, and hopefully I can bring more updates in a more timely manner. But I do want to put out that anyone who's interested in working and have ideas on this or the Northwest Corridor, I would like resident input. So just email me at my council address, and I would really like to speak to people who are interested to find out what they would like in this rail project. So thank everyone, and now we're going to get back to, let me find my right agenda. All right, we're back to motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas. Do any council members have items they want to add to future agendas? Seeing none, we're going to go on to the public invited to be heard. Remember that you have 3 minutes, and we would like your name and address. The first one on the list is, and I can already see her smiling, is Georgetta Johnston. Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Georgetta Johnston from 320 Homestead Parkway, Longmont, 80504. So I'm receiving from the Times call. I went on a rail ride with the senior up to Leadville yesterday on a train, and I heard all these situations that people aren't wanting that we need, and that's an art and entertainment center because we can bring. It can help with the city, with the Longmont Chorale, the orchestra, the schools, different issues when they get it built. I know they've got so much money already, and all the different small towns would come and enjoy and help too. Why do we have to go elsewhere? So I feel like we need to work on that. The sugar factory looks ugly. I don't understand all of what you're doing, but if you could fix it all fancy and stuff, I think that would be nice. Seriously. Myself, I'm all for it, and some of these people that don't see this, they got a problem. I see it every day in the Times call. I heard it on the bus. But the thing is, I don't believe in upping a whole lot of taxes either, and I think we've got doctors and different people that would donate. I know, I've lived in this town myself, so there's all kinds of ways of doing it. So I'm speaking to you people in the council and different ones. I'm speaking to people that are listening all over the town of Longmont, 100,000. So I hope people are hearing and want good things for this nice city. That's one thing. Another thing is we need better stores. Why should we everybody have to go out and shop? I don't understand. I thought we had somebody that was trying to work on things like that they've got rid of all of our nice stores. We just have Kmart, Target, and a lot of those places don't have good stores. We need better stores. I don't know what the situation is, why they disappeared or not. So you all need to work on that and different situations. Also, the streets and roads, we're going to be driving junkers if we don't get some of this stuff fixed. This is not fun. It's not fun. Lord help us. And I don't know why, what we're doing with the taxes, what we're doing with the money, why we're not fixing it with our breweries and marijuana places and whatever. So that's, and buffets. We need buffets. All the others are just having certain fast foods, not healthy stuff. And we need better things like that. This is all good talk for a good city. And it's 100,000, so it's not like it's some little country town. It's a big city. And like our affordable housing also is nice, but also it needs to be not rich and nice and safe and all those things. You know, this is a nice city. Longmont. I've lived here 70-some years. And the thing is anyway, Lord bless you, precious people, for listening.
Thank you,
Keep doing a
Georgetta.
wonderful job.
So we have the Silver Creek Academy Leadership Program. I think this is Dahlia Espinoza. That's different. So can you state your name and address, please?
Hello, my name is Genesis, and this is Margaret, Keenan, and Delilah. Our address is 4901 Nelson Road in Longmont. We are from the Silver Creek Leadership Academy and would love to invite you all to our Leadership Expo.
This event will take place at Silver Creek High School on October 2nd, 2023 from 5 to 7 p.m. This is an event made to celebrate the accomplishments of students. There will be a volunteer award ceremony for our fellow SCLA members and senior capstone projects that will be on display.
There will be music and an In-N-Out food truck, which is a fundraiser for our parent groups. Tickets will need to be purchased ahead of time, and you will not be able to buy anything from the food trucks during the event.
We would love to purchase your dinner, so please let us know ahead of time through our email. There will be games, music, and overall a good time. This event is open to the public, so come on over to our fall party and celebrate our impactful accomplishments. Thank you.
Can you tell us the date one more time?
October 2nd from 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Now I have Dahlia Espinoza. Ms. Espinoza? No? Okay. I don't know this name, do you? Jay? I'm sorry, I can't read this name. It looks like Jay. It's,
Also at the 425 Chelsea.
yeah, anybody here from 425 Chelsea Court? No? Okay, we'll go on to Steve Artschuler then. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'll move this up a little bit. My name is Steve Altschuler. I live at 1555 Taylor Drive. I'd like to remind everyone that when they took office, they swore to uphold the Constitution. And a couple weeks ago, talking that I shouldn't be able to say whatever I wanted to is in violation of the First Amendment. I'm not going to make a big deal tonight, but in general, I think that needs to be noticed. I know that it was like a year ago, but I think the city council is going to be bringing it up soon. Considering red flag laws or raising the age of gun ownership is a violation of the Second Amendment, of our Second Amendment rights, and they're in direct defiance of our Supreme Court. Changing a little bit, our budget for 2024 is $444 million. That's a 20% increase in 3 years, which is 6% a year, which was like 3 times the rate of inflation that it was during President Trump. It's about the same as President Biden right now. That would be $4,000 for every man, woman, and child in Longmont. But kids and lower income people don't pay taxes. So the real price of that $440 million is about $16,000 per taxpayer in Longmont. If you add another $100 million for the rec center, the YMCA, and 200-unit low-income housing areas that you're planning on, you're up to about $20,000 per taxpayer. Rents and mortgages would be about 20% lower if City Council would quit taxing everyone for their pet projects. The definition of socialism, a political economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. The definition of capitalism, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit, which is also called free market capitalism. Free market capitalism has brought millions more people out of poverty than any other system of government. So I think you all need to brush up on that and promote more free market capitalism than socialism. Low-income housing, if you're going to do it, should be limited for 2 or 3 years. I think veterans should be the first to get low-income housing. In those 2 or 3 years, anyone receiving low-income housing should be required to take classes at Front Range so they can help themselves get more valuable. We don't need low-income housing people for the next 50 years of their life. And if a quarter or 50% of their rent is being paid, there's an incentive for them not to help themselves. I'm fine. That was fast.
It was.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We are now at special reports and presentations. I see no special reports, so we'll go to the study session items immediately. The first one is 2024 proposed budget presentation. Invite Jim Golden, our CFO.
Mayor Peck, members of council, I'm Jim Golden, the Chief Financial Officer. And tonight on the budget presentations, we're going to be covering a number of topics. We have myself as well as some other staff that'll be coming up to assist in some of them. So tonight we'll be going through briefly the Natural Resources 8.5 project plan. All the new positions, we have 34 new FTE in the 24 proposed budget. We're going to discuss incremental development revenue, one-time expenses. We're going to go through the DDA budget and associated budgets that are also overseen by the DDA. And then we'll have presentation on Human Service Agency funding, supporting actions for mental health, and early childhood capacity building. And we're going to go through grants and external funding sources, and then finally the public safety budget and with the Longmont Humane Society impacts. So beginning with the update on the 8.5 program, I'm just going to cover this briefly. This was included in an appropriation in August. You did already do an appropriation for 3 parks. We are now going to have a second appropriation that will be presented to you on October 10th for first reading, and that is to include 4 more parks that are going to be added and considered as well. And in relationship to that, we are making some adjustments to the 2004 to 2008 CIP to lower some funding for the Dry Creek Community Park project so that we can maintain a healthy fund balance in the Park Improvement Fund. And so within the communication tonight, there's a little larger explanation of that, but as well, we have 2 attachments in the communication that are new pages that will go into that proposed CIP. So that's all I had on that. And you can stop me on any of these to ask me questions as I roll through them. But I'm going to go straight now then to the new positions. Question?
Seeing no one in the queue, Jim, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, there's 34 new positions that are proposed in this budget. Within the council packet tonight, you've got a attachment L. It's a pretty large attachment that is providing metric information for all of those new positions. I'm not going to go through the metrics. I will just briefly summarize the 34 new FTE, 13.5 of them in the general fund. We have 4.9 in the streets fund, 4.3 in the electric and broadband fund, 4 in the public safety fund, and then we're getting down to 2 or less in some of these other funds that I'm not going to go through here. It will be total FTE in this proposed budget will move to 1,147.815 if these were all to be added. Going through them briefly, there's 1 FTE redevelopment manager, 1 FTE device specialist fixed term, all these so far in the general fund, 1 FTE senior code enforcement zoning and housing inspector, and 3 custodians.
Jim, can I just interrupt you?
You bet.
Councilor McCoy has a question.
Sure.
Back on slide 6.
6, like that is slide 6. Okay.
Oh, right here. So are any of these where you combine somebody and make them whole? So like, as you take 0.5 and 0.49, any of those where you're connecting them into a complete?
So these, as I mentioned, there's 34 new FTE. They're all full FTE, but some of them are allocated across a number of different funds, which is why, as you can see,
that's what I thought.
the
just
last
so the
6 or
public
7 funds
understood.
have percentage type of allocations for some FTE.
So they have different responsibilities at different kind of times in there.
In the sense that they're being supported, the funding is being provided by a number of funds because they're for an effort that crosses across those funds.
All right,
Some of
thank
them
you.
are sustainability related and things like that.
All right, thank you.
One more, Councilor Martin. Oh, thank you, Jim.
It's the same answer then. All right, right, so then I was moving through these FTE. There's 3 FTE custodians in the general funds. They're somewhat offset as well by a reduction in contract services, as we've been using some temp wages for some of those positions currently. 1 FTE, actually 2 FTE youth program specialists in the general fund, 1 senior recreation program coordinator, 1 grounds maintenance technician 2, and 1 park supervisor, and then 1 senior parks and open space ranger for Union Reservoir. And then a public information officer, and that's also offset by a reduction in temporary wages from the general fund.
So, do you want to, are there any questions on the position on this page, or the first page?
Yeah, those are all the general fund positions I went through so far.
Counselor Waters?
Harold, I don't have questions about the specific positions or the numbers of FTE. And this just may be my frame on metrics that would apply to personnel. I do appreciate the enclosure and the description. The description of what people are going to be expected to do is helpful. But a description is real different than a performance, or whether it's a performance metric or a department metrics, and what would be different, right, for either clients within the organization, right, if this is one department serving another department or serving the public, in terms of what will be different. The so what is a result of the what, right? A good description of the what people will be doing. But if I look at it and go, how would I answer the question? So what's going to be different for anybody in terms of reduced response times, shorter waits, lower rates? Probably won't be lower rates, but from department to department. And I realize some of them are more conducive than others,
Right.
to those kinds of metrics. I just didn't see, I saw maybe one in one of the descriptions, metrics embedded. Maybe it's just my misunderstanding of how to think about metrics. But it would be hard for me to answer a question, so what will be different for me as either as a beneficiary or a client of another department or as a member of the community because the city added 34 and a half FTE?
Yeah, and most of those, I know we go over that when I'm reviewing the budget, and, if you go back to the first page, Jim, just generally what I could tell you. No, next one. No, forward, sorry. So when we look at this slide with slide 7, and you talk about, well, what can we expect with the redevelopment manager? That's handling the volume of projects that's coming and actually letting us move through those projects more on pace with what is coming at us versus having to delay projects based on the staffing. And when we talk about that, you go, well, what's in that mix? First and Main Transit Station, the steam area, and then obviously the sugar mill. We're seeing a lot of increased activity, and that's going to let us deal with it. The device specialist is similar about processing our computers in the field and getting those through. And then there's some unique ones. And so when you talk about the senior code enforcement, zoning, and housing, so one of the challenges we had is that our only housing inspector was Dane, who got promoted to lead that division. But we also know we needed more capacity to do that. And when we look at what we're doing on the housing side in terms of working through those processes, that really allows us to deal with more, but it's getting them more involved in that process. And the custodians is really a financial issue, in that what we're finding is contracting out for custodians, we're upside, we've just seen the contracting world pass by, so we're now hiring those again internally. And it really lets us actually handle more facilities and have more capacity to deal with facilities and night activity. So I know I can kind of go through this with you all, and we can put that together and get that to you before the council adopts a budget. Because I think it's important, and then the next two, these are two things that I've talked about before. But when we look at the issues that we've been having with the youth of our community, and specifically what public safety and youth services is having to deal with, both of those positions are very targeted. You see Rewind in one and family engagement in another. That's actually to increase capacity and our volume of kids that we can work with to try to get in front of what we're seeing. So I think we can do that for all of these, and I think it's more specific to, so what? I kind of just worked you through, here's what we're going to be able to do.
A little bit of follow-up. Thanks, Mayor Peck. Again, I'm not challenging the need, because I know how short-staffed we are at places across the city, or in departments. But even, if you and I were to spend 20 minutes together in terms of, so, what do we estimate now as wait times, right? Just in terms of redevelopment. By what percentage, or, how are we gonna know, how are we gonna measure whether or not we actually reduce wait times? Or, on Rewind, how many kids and families are touched by the Rewind program now? With the addition of FTE, we would expect to see a 20% increase in the number of kids, not who are committing crimes, but who are diverted from the criminal justice system into Rewind, as a way just to kind of measure, right? Those are pretty simple measures.
Yeah.
And as we've looked at these from time to time, I know some departments, I'm looking at Valerie up there, and I know what a great job she does with metrics in her department, but her work lends itself to measurements that are more precise than in, what's happening with custodians, for example. But even that could be just a measure in terms of dollar savings, or how many square feet we clean a week, or areas that are not on a rotational basis. Anything, not anything, but a variety of ways to get more specific. And then at the end of the day, you or another council, just to answer the question, did we make the differences, and how do we know, right, when we're building budgets a year from now? So.
Yeah,
anyway,
we can get that to you before adoption, because
I know I've been a broken record on this,
it's
but this is
here, and
my
we-
last
yeah.
opportunity to get that ore in the water,
Yeah.
so.
So going back to the ranger for the Union Reservoir, is there anywhere in this budget, because we've heard from counselors that we have problems with people in parks, for example, McIntosh, where there is no one reminding them of the rules of no drinking, no swimming in the water, this is surface only. Do we have that in the budget at all, or are these gonna be rotating rangers? How's that gonna work?
So the way they presented it is that there's a different challenge when it comes to Union. So what this lets us do is keep that ranger at Union, but then the other rangers that we have can get out into the other areas of the community to deal with those types of issues. In addition, there's another position that we have that we worked with that was Zach, Joni, and others, where there is an enforcement coordinator position that's also going to help facilitate that conversation and to see where we can bring other resources in to deal with, those types of issues. So that'll be coordinating rangers, that'll be coordinating parking control, code enforcement, and bringing more resources to bear versus where we tend to operate in specific silos, but really bringing everything in to try to deal with those positions. So it's really a combination of a couple of things that we think will allow us to get at those issues.
Harold, how many rangers do we have? Do you know off the top of your head?
I know we added 2 last year. Where is David? We can get that for you, but
Okay, it's like
Yeah.
3 or 4.
we've added more in recent years because the last time we had the issues at Union, I think we added a couple of rangers in there too. But we'll get you that number. I'll look it up real fast.
And does that include the rangers that we had for the downtown breezeways and that were working down there? I know we did that a couple years ago.
Yeah, that does not include that. This is
Okay.
different.
All right, thank you. Let's see, who do we have here? Counselor Hidalgo Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to bring that up. I wasn't sure if there were more positions coming down the line. And I appreciate, Harold, that you had mentioned about, crossing over different departments rather than working on silos. So some of the things that have come, to my attention at McIntosh Lake, and plus I walk over there and I've seen this, people drinking, that could be alleviated by a ranger kind of reminding. People going in the water. That water's gross. That water is gross. Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh my God. Do you not know what it looks like when the water level, just stop. So I had to get that out. I live near there. I'm frequent and see all those issues. So that's something that could be alleviated through rangers. Parking is becoming a problem. I mean, even for folks who are just trying to drive along Lakeshore Drive, the cars that are far away from the curb. During COVID, I had to yell at somebody. Well, I was calm, but there was cooking hibachi right on someone's driveway. And it was like, move that, you don't live here, and just the inconsiderate nature. So that could be something that is public safety. Parking, different code enforcement fractions. So the fact, just, please make sure that these departments are connecting with each other so that, and that response can happen immediately. I feel for the people who live across the street from there. It shouldn't be up to them to have to go out and approach these people. I tried to do that at the start of COVID, and I will never do that again. That was probably not the very safest or wisest thing for me to do, but, I felt just heartbroken for these residents, so thank you.
So here's the answer to your question. We have 7 full-time park and watershed rangers. We have multiple seasonal rangers that we bring in to do the work, to your other question. So, and that's from Joni that she got, and that includes open space trails, Button Rock, and different issues. And that's really the point at the coordination, because can we have parking control assist in the parking issues, or how do we interplay with the patrol officers when we're dealing with this? And it really is bringing that in, because I believe we did buy a boat or a Sea-Doo for the park rangers at Union last year, so they could go out and make sure that we're enforcing the Life Vest and other requirements. And so it's really trying to get the team to surround an issue versus expecting any one individual area to deal with it, because it's really maximizing our capacity. And that was part of the conversation with getting the senior ranger to stay at Union. Then the rangers that have been having to stay there can then move out in the community.
Thank you. Back to Jim.
Okay, so I will pick it back up. We went through the general fund.
So the other, Jim, before you keep going, one of the positions I want to talk about that's similar to what we talked about with the ranger position. And so you're looking at, and if you looked at the sheet that we provided you all where we checked what does it impact. So when you look at the public information officer, that's related to several positions. And what we were able to do is, Zach is looking at some restructuring in his department, and doing that, we needed a full-time public information officer. So by funding the full-time public information officer, what we're actually able to get is the enforcement coordinating position that we talked about earlier, and we're also able to get a neighborhood service officer to come along with it. So by funding one position, he was able to take additional dollars that he had within his budget, restructure some things. So we're actually getting 3 different components, making that structural move that really touches council's priorities of housing, neighborhoods, quality of life, and those issues. But it was really dependent on the public information officer. If we didn't do that, we couldn't restructure the way we needed to on the police side.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to pick up here with the street fund. We have 1 FTE neighborhood resource specialist, 1 alternative transportation planner, 1 senior GIS mapping tech, and 1 transportation engineering assistant. And then we have a position split between the street fund and storm drainage fund. It's an administrative analyst. We have a PMO manager, fixed term, which is funded by 10 different funds, which is what we were referring to before. Some of the positions, administrative analyst, fixed term is also for PMO and funded by 10 funds. We have an outreach victims advocate from the Public Safety Fund, and 3 firefighters from the Public Safety Fund. And then in the Open Space Fund, 1 natural resource technician, 2 for plant ecologist, and another 1 for plant weeds. And then for the Fleet Fund, a master ASE technician, 2. And then a fleet service coordinator assistant, and this is another position that's offset by some reduction in temp wages, also in the Fleet Fund there. And we have 1 FTE home ownership specialist for the Attainable Housing Fund, one data analyst for broadband from the Electric and Broadband Fund, and one Journey substation worker for electric in the Electric and Broadband Fund. And then final last three positions, one FTE Energy Efficiency and Education Specialist from the Sustainability Fund and the Electric and Broadband Fund. One FTE Technical Functional Analyst for electric, and one FTE Technical Functional Analyst, CRM and Special Projects from about 5 or 6 different funds there listed. So those are the 34 FTE that are proposed in this budget.
One of the things in this, when you see fixed term, so you saw fixed term with the redevelopment manager to the point of the metrics and what are we expecting. That's intentional in the budget because we know what we're hoping to see. If we don't see it, then we don't need to continue that position in perpetuity based on the capacity and what are we going to accomplish. You also saw that in terms of the project management office. So we've been talking to council about what do we need to do internally to make sure that we can stay on course with our capital projects. How are we creating the reporting mechanisms? And so this is really the creation of a new function that will come in and work with the entire organization on large projects to really work with us in terms of how we're building the system out, how are we staying on time how are we staying on time, and how are we staying on budget. And some of the work that we're starting to see that hopefully in the near future we can present to council is they're already starting to give me the dashboards so that I can look at it and look at, well, what are the major challenges? Is it staffing? And I can pick something and then I can look over and see where we are with the project so I can start seeing what's falling behind, understanding why it's falling behind so we can be on the front end of making the adjustments we need to stay on time and on budget because time is money. And so that's really a lot of what the project management office is going to be doing with strategic integration. And Jim's group in finance is really helping us work that issue out. So that's all linked to really shifting how we approach capital projects.
Okay, I'm now going to move into incremental development revenue. So within this budget, there's a projection of 750 building permits for new dwelling units. And our current financial policy is that any revenue from the first 200 of dwelling units is regular operating type revenue, and any revenue that we get from anything greater than 200 permits, we consider to be incremental development revenue. And that means, what that means is that we can't be sure that that's going to be ongoing into the future as development slows down. And so we have used that money from from that type of revenue to fund operating expenses within the general fund, but we've considered them to be funded by incremental development revenue. And so they're subject to being reduced in the future if the revenue drops below 200 permits. So the amount of IDR in this budget is almost $400,000, and the position or the expenses that are being covered through this $400,000 are listed here on this slide. They've been in place for a while, since we've been receiving IDR for quite a while. And these are all expenses that were initially identified as being IDR funded at that point in time. So we have 46% of a planning technician, we have an associate planner and a permit technician and an electrical inspector. They were all added like 15, 16, and 17. And then for other ongoing costs, we have temp wages that was added in 2017 and overtime for plan review that was added in 2018. We'll move into one-time expenses. We've got this detailed within your council communication. There are a couple of attachments here that give all of the detail that makes up all of the one-time expenses for the general fund, for the public safety fund, and then for all of the other funds. But this is the general fund total here, and we just have them totaled in subcategories here on the slide. But again, you can find the detail for it within the council communications. So we have $1.6 million for capital equipment. We have $1.15 million for IT or technology improvements, equipment. And then $183,000 for non-capital small equipment and supplies. And then 5.47 million of one-time services or expenses. And a good deal of that, as we talked about during the property tax discussion, at least there's 3 million of that is not designated this time. We'll be talking more about that next week when we pick up on property tax again.
Can I ask a question
bet.
here? Okay. I'm looking at the IT equipment or technology improvements. This is, I just need clarification. Do we as a city pay for our municipal judges' IT equipment and upkeep, maintenance, O&M? Are we responsible for that as a city?
Yes, we do that.
So if they need software update, if they come to council or they come to you?
It should come through our system. We have a technology committee that looks at what we're doing in terms of software and how we're moving through this. So right now where we sit, we have a computer replacement program. We have many different programs that we have in place. Right now, in terms of public safety in the court, the one thing that we're working on is the police. I'm looking at Sandy, the RMS system, criminal justice system, which is primarily a police system that the court utilizes in terms of how that interacts. Council may remember that system and the fire system both were end of life, and we had to start accumulating money to do it. So I think the question is it really depends on what it is that we're doing, who's using it, and how it integrates within our broader system. So I made the decision a few years ago. We were starting to have problems with computer systems interacting with each other. And so we have some primary systems within our structure. So obviously Munis, that's our primary financial system. When we look at the geospatial work we're doing, that's Esri. When we look at our building inspection, that's Acela. And so we have these core, I call them the mothership systems. So as we're looking at different softwares, it's really how does it work? What are we trying to do? And we have to be careful of having too many one-off software systems because that can start creating different challenges in terms of the APIs. If we're trying to have things interconnected, we've seen some failures in the system, which is why we have a technology committee that anybody that has a request, they need to put that request into the technology committee and they'll start working with them so we can understand what that means. What does it mean in terms of staff time and what we have to do? Who's going to support it? How is it going to be supported? And what's the impact of the system? So we do have a process.
Okay. Thank you.
Sandy, did I mess anything up on that? Okay.
I was just going to mention that part of the project that he was talking about was the criminal justice and fire system. So that does include complete replacement of the legacy court systems that we're working on right now.
Okay. And you said that you were, I probably won't say this correctly, but accumulating money in order to put.
We accumulated money,
Right.
and now I think they've let the contract, and now we're starting to do implementation on it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, at the bottom of the slide, I'm just showing actually the source of this 8.4 million. About half of it is coming from really leftovers from operations from 22, where we may have exceeded budget and revenues or saved some expenditure monies. And then the other half of it is coming from one-time revenues here, and like I mentioned before, the property tax being a large part of that. In the public safety fund, the one-time here, we have capital equipment of $182,000, and IT equipment of $372,000, non-capital small equipment of $85,000, and one-time services and expenses of $282,000. Then a couple of CIP projects that are being funded through, this is partial funding towards these projects, $200,000 for the Safety and Justice Rehab Project, and then $55,000 for the prairie dog barrier replacements at the shooting range. And then all other funds, this is the breakdown for the rest of the funds in the city, 8.9 million of capital equipment, 438,000 for IT equipment, non-capital of 153,000, and then one-time services or expenses of 4.3 million. So again, attachment M and N and O are all the pages where you can see all the detail of those proposed expenditures. So any further questions on one-time expenses before I move to the DDA? Okay, so I'm going to start this presentation. Kimberly McKee's here. She's also going to join me to pick it up and finish it. So I will have her jump in here in a few minutes. So the LDDA, not only are we looking at their budget, but also at a couple of funds and entity that the LDDA manages for the city, including the Downtown Parking Fund and the General Improvement District. And then the LDDA has a number of its own funds that we're looking at here quickly. First with the GID, the proposed budget for 24 is $189,000. It's an increase of about $25,000. The largest source of the increase really is an increase in the administrative transfer fee from the city. And that's going up about $12,500. It's really based on a lot on the level of service that the council's providing as the board to the GID. And I think it's also based on issues that have been brought to you on your agenda related to the GID. And I think last year, and this is based on 22's activity, and the hotel came to you a few times, and I think that probably is what was driving this difference mostly. On the Downtown Parking Fund, it's a budget of $128,000, increase of almost $13,000. Most of the increases in O&M for professional services, which is including parking consulting for $5,000. Then the DDA Operating Fund, this is funded by their 5 mill levy. It's a budget of $380,000 for next year. Small increase over 23. There is some increases in personal services and O&M, but there's also a decrease in O&M of about $25,000 of one-time dollars that were budgeted in 22 for some consulting help with the increase. We're just about to talk about this, and I can't remember the name of it, but the TIF increase that we'll be talking about in a few minutes went through the legislators last few months ago. So. And there's also, for next year, a $15,000 increase in one-time expenses for computers here. The Debt Service Fund, so this is where the tax increment financing that is received by the LDDA is received into this fund, and then from there it goes out through loans that the council authorizes an interfund loan to utilize TIF because it has to be freed up through a debt under a state statute. So anyhow, next year it's budgeted at $1.6 million here of TIF that we'll be receiving here. That's based on the projection of what we were going to receive in 2023. In the end of August, we did get a projection of $2.1 million after the budget was put together. $2.1 million of potential TIF for 2024. I think, this, of course, is subject to what happens with HH, Proposition HH, and also I did just recently, today actually, send a question to the county to double check this because the DDA TIF schedule, the base year rolls over for the first time in the last 10 years. It moves up a year and will move up 1 year annually afterwards. And I wanted to make sure that the county caught that because this is a big increase and it could be possible that they did not roll that base year up because they haven't had to do it before. So, and we are the only DDA that they deal with on TIF, so it would have been the first time they would have had to deal with it. So this could come down because of that as well. So what we're using it for in 2024 is $386,000 to spend to finance art and entertainment activities, and then another $768,000 to fund construction fund projects. On the art and entertainment fund, this is the breakdown of the budget. It's increasing $45,000 next year, almost $13,000 increase in personal services, $38,000 for increase in contract services for events put on in the DDA. And then again, I said TIF funding in there is $386,000. So on the once go back to the TIF again, the construction fund is funded through that tax increment financing. And the way that works under TIF, for properties that are within the DDA, 50% of the property tax that is levied by any of the taxing entities that is levied within the DDA, the growth in the value over the prior 30 years goes to the DDA annually for funding of projects that support the DDA's master plan of development. And so, as I already mentioned, they'll get $1.6 million this year and up to $2.1 next year. And I'm going to now ask Kimberly to pick it up from here to talk about the projects that are being funded there.
Second, okay. Mayor Peck, members of council, I'm Kimberly McKee, Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority here in Longmont. As Jim said, the DDA uses tax increment financing to implement our plan of development. Uses include different projects as well as capital improvements and investments in catalyst projects and incentives. As part of our first extension in 2013, council allowed the DDA to keep a portion of the tax increment for infrastructure replacement dollars. So you'll see that's about $76 that we're budgeting for the next year. We also transfer about 4% of the costs into our operation for property project management for staff. So that's the $20,000. Can I advance this? And then we also do a number of projects. So we use TIF to implement. The first two are some of the data sources that we subscribe to, so we can really look at the health and climate and what's happening, or the vibrancy of our district. Cultural programs for $15,000. Some ongoing support of our parking study and to do implementation. We also are joint funding, hopefully, an event trailer with recreation to make the use of our city assets more efficient, so we can kind of share those assets. Looking at some joint programming with our economic partners, and then the ongoing lease of the Spoke Garage that we invested in last year. And then the major thing that we're budgeting for this year is $150,000 to help with the microtransit, as well as looking at a downtown shuttle option. As we know that there will be some parking displacement during construction, we want to make sure that people can easily get to the other parking that we have within our own parking system. So how do we kind of leverage that microtransit to look at possibly a shuttle? Also reinvesting in some of the incentives that we have. Those dollars are going low, so we can get some more of those out, and then maintenance of our cameras. And then in our CIP that you've probably heard about before, as we discussed in January with this council, the board put together another $250,000 for implementation of the Main Street Corridor Plan. For us, pedestrian safety, traffic calming, and looking at connectivity is super important, so we do want to play a role in that. That funding brings our total up to about $500,000 within that CIP. We're also going to refresh some of the alley assets that the DDA manages in the alley project that we invested in, as well as implementing our placemaking plan by looking at some enhanced crosswalks on Kimberk. So as Jim was mentioning, one of the things that was a major change last year, the DDAs in Fort Collins, Grand Junction, and Longmont worked together to on Bill SB 23-175. This bill would create an additional 20-year extension of our TIF, which would be after the 20-year extension we're in right now. I would really like to thank Mayor Peck and members of council and city staff for their support while we worked on this. It was really great. Our first 20-year extension will end in 2033. When the extension happens, and if we do have another extension, it will not change the taxes that are paid from the folks that are within the district. It's just how those taxes are allocated. And so at our last board meeting, our board passed a resolution to ask City Council to authorize an additional 20 years of TIF. TIF is a really important tool for us to maintain and implement our master plan. Well, I talked a little bit about the projects and the things that we do, but it's also for these catalyst projects that we have seen make a real impact on our downtown with Roosevelt Park Apartments, South Main Station, and the Spoke. And it will allow us to continue to do those things. One of the reasons why we're asking council to do this now is when these projects come to us and as we're seeing a lot of activity in some of the underutilized parts of our DDA district, if we can count on projecting that TIF out for 30 years, it's much more helpful. Right now, our clock is closing, and so when we look at deals, we can only look at the next 8 years, and that's if they start being built today, and that's not normally the case. And so by having this extension, it will allow us to look a little bit more in the future. So I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I'll just add that, so we will bring an ordinance to the council on October 10th to consider that TIF extension, which is the action that's going to be required to do that. So if we don't have any other questions.
Councillor Martin.
Oh, we do.
Yeah,
One more.
it's not much of a question, Kimberly. I just wanted to say that I am always happy when I hear a long-range plan. And I think that the DDA has done a beautiful job in bringing us through a couple or several very difficult years. And I'm glad to hear that you've got such a strong plan for getting back to normal.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Okay, so now we're going to shift here, and I'm going to have Christina Pacheco come down, and we are going to cover Human Service Agency funding, supporting actions for mental health, and early childhood capacity building.
Alrighty. Great. Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of Council. Christina Pacheco, Human Services Department Director. And I'm here to talk about the human services items on the agenda. Early childhood capacity building, supporting action for mental health, and human services agency funding. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with early childhood capacity building because we have one of our consultants here, Grace Pyanen from Delivery Associates, to talk about the work that we've completed, talk about the roadmap, where we've been, where we're going, and we'll provide a demo of what we have so far. So about $850,000 was carried over in the Children, Youth, and Families budget from 2022. A portion of this is going to be used to support the completion of work by Delivery Associates. We're going to create a marketing plan with our comms team and launch the public-facing early childhood dashboard to paint a clear picture of supply and demand of early childhood slots. So phase one of the project, the internal dashboard, has been completed, and now we are in phase two to be completed at the end of 2023. So I'm going to turn it over to Grace now to talk a little bit more in depth of what we've accomplished through our work with them. And then I'll take it over and finish the early childhood pieces. And we're going to get the most recent, the other link. Yeah, we're going to get the. Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay.
Hi, my name is Grace Pinnanen, and I work for Delivery Associates, which is a public sector advisory firm. And we've been working with Children, Youth, and Family Services since November of 2022. And I worked with a lot of communities, and I don't mind saying this in a video that will go on YouTube, but they are definitely one of my favorite teams I've ever worked with. So, as Christina mentioned, we've been charged with the big task of trying to achieve 100% access to quality early childhood education in Longmont. And we've been doing this in 2 phases. In our first phase, we asked ourselves the question of what are the barriers to early childhood education, quality early childhood education? Why are families not able to access this? And once we identified those barriers, which were a lack of awareness, some parents don't know the importance of early childhood education, accessibility, perhaps you work non-traditional hours and you're not able to drop off your kids at 9 a.m. and pick them up at 3, or maybe there's not one in your community. Cultural differences, some families prefer to keep their children at home, and affordability. It's very, very expensive to be able to give your children quality care. Once we had these barriers identified, we then started to go out and look, where can we find data on these different barriers so we can monitor how our strategies are doing. Once we got this data on these barriers, we also started collecting data on demand. So how many 3 to 4-year-olds are there in Longmont? Where are they located? The supply, getting a lot of information on formal providers and their locations. The quality, which we got from the QRIS rating system. And then with this information, we were able to kind of track the enrollment gap, so the gap between supply and demand. And with this information, we were able to put it on a dashboard, which we can show you.
And we want to get this specific dashboard because it has a great map that we would like you to see.
This is the same one, isn't it?
Well, we can start there.
Yeah, no. She.
Okay, go ahead and start here. Perfect.
So we always say you can't manage what you can't measure, so we went about how can we start tracking how we're doing. And so with this dashboard and map, we're able to be able to better understand the supply and demand for care, verify policy decisions over time, increase transparency throughout teams for using the same dashboard, and being able to better monitor care scarcity. So you'll see in our dashboard we have 6 different pages. So we have that demand piece that we mentioned, supply, quality, data on the different barriers, and then regional comparison so you can see how Longmont is doing compared to other communities. And then an FAQ page, because sometimes you look at graphs and you're like, I have a question about that. And so we try to proactively start addressing people's questions. So how the page is set up, you have the different tabs, a brief description about what you're looking at, and then different cards that can quickly tell you at a glance information on these different buckets of data. You can also choose comparisons from different years if you want to see how things change over time, and there are helpful little arrows that can show you if it's up or down. We also have population trends, so you can see how things are changing. So we only have census data up to 2021. That's the only thing that's been released. However, we do have a light regression, so you can statistically see in this model as like a prediction of what that population age will be, so you can better inform your supply and how many seats that you will need. And you can change for other age groups as well. This will change, which is helpful. And if you want to zoom in on the data, you can as well. It's pretty interactive, so you can better take a screenshot for a report if you want to. And then we also have different information on demographics in case you want to better be able to understand the population that you are serving as well and how trends have changed over time. And you can select different demographics as well. So we have supply as well. We have a note that there is a little bit of a limitation to our dashboard that we only have data on formal care providers, and that we acknowledge that friends, family, and neighbors can provide great care, and they're a really important part of making sure that our kids get great quality early childhood education. But unfortunately, we just do not have data on informal providers at this time. So we do acknowledge that as a disclaimer in our dashboard. So that's something we would love to have in the future one day, but unfortunately that data is just not available at this time. So this page is great because you can see what's the capacity of seats in formal facilities, how many professionals do you have, how many kids are there per early childhood education professional in Boulder County. This data should be updated soon, but you can see what year it's from clearly, so there are no questions, and where the source is from. And you can also adjust the charts if you want to see how many spots are there just in child care centers or preschool programs. So it's pretty interactive. And then we also have a chart down here where you can look at different providers, the service type they are, where they're located, what's their capacity and QRIS rating, as well as just different demographic data on people that are providing this care. For quality, we're using QRIS. That's the best measure that we have at this time, but this could be updated if there are better data sources available to really capture the quality of care that's being provided to children. So we have the number of seats at each level of QRIS rating. So there are 833 spots in a facility that has a QRS rating of a 4. And then how many providers there are at each level as well. And then as mentioned, we're tracking different barriers. So what % of the population has access within a 10-minute walk of a high quality care center, same within biking distance, and then also just a metric on the average distance between a child and their care center. And then different information on costs, because as we mentioned, it's very unaffordable for many families. And on our final page, we have just different regions that you can compare if you want to compare Boulder to Broomfield or Gilpin or the state. So you can see how you're doing in comparison. And then finally, as mentioned, we have the FAQ page. You can access it either through this tab or on each of our pages. We have a tab that can take you there as well. That just provides more information on why the dashboard and map was created, where the information's coming from, the methodology, and who you should contact if you have more questions. And I think if we can find the map, that'd be great.
The other piece, the map that we're looking for, maps has some really great information on childcare deserts, and okay, so we can, and I can get that information to council later. It doesn't. It's okay. It's okay. We can. I can send that information later.
I can talk a little bit about the map if you'd like.
Go ahead.
So can I ask a question, Hillary? How soon will this be available to the public to access?
We'll talk about that. We're actually working with our comms team to come up with what kind of information, and how to roll that out to the public. That's going to be our phase 2 through December, through the end of this year. So by the end of this year, we'll have the public-facing portion of this.
Thank you.
Want to talk about the map a little bit?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're not able to show the map at this time, but it's able to provide the locations of each of these formal care facilities in Longmont, and we're getting this information from the Colorado Information Marketplace. And you're also able to see, based on the size of the dot, how many seats they have, where they're located. The color corresponds with the quality of the facility. And it's been very helpful on our end to be able to see where are their care deserts and help potentially inform future investment of if you are going to open up a new center or if you are going to make an investment, where should it be? And then you're also able to layer on different demographic data. And then also with each corresponding location, you're able to add a filter to see different walking patterns. So how many people are able to access this facility by walking or biking. So my apologies that you aren't able to see it, just technical difficulties.
We'll see it later. So Grace, I know that you said you didn't have the data for FFN right now, but doesn't Boulder County have a list of the registered FFN families in Longmont that could be added?
Mayor Peck, yes, Boulder County does have a list of child care homes. And so they are they would be licensed homes. So the licensed homes are included in what we have. What we do not have are unlicensed or informal care. A sister that takes care of somebody's children. We don't have that granular level of data, but we do have all of the public information.
So where is it on the map? Because when you listed the centers, they looked like they were in schools, in churches, and I didn't get to read the whole list. I think that's on another, yeah, the
And
other.
supply.
In the PowerPoint when we were talking about the different data sources?
Here. Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So there is a filter that we could use to filter out the child care homes.
And those charts are all exportable, so if you wanted to do additional analysis, you can export it as an Excel.
Great. Okay, I just didn't see this, and I wanted to make sure that was in there as well. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you for your work.
Grace? Okay.
Show about phase 3 a little bit, the website. Sure. So this was the first phase of our work, and the second phase that we're actively working on is that public-facing component piece. And so that is the goal of being able to further communicate to the public of why ECE is important, share where there are care centers available, have a space that formal providers can have more outreach with the public, and then as mentioned for friends, family, neighbor care, because they are so important, help provide a space where we can acknowledge their importance and value, as well as share additional training that is provided from different members of the community.
Okay, I think Counselor Waters has a question, comment?
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Let me just a editorial comment. It wouldn't surprise me at all for you to come here and say at that microphone, that's the best team you've ever worked with. Because that's probably the best team in any municipality doing this business anywhere. That's just an observation. Christina, I think to contrast this dashboard to a presentation you made in maybe February of 2019 in anticipation of a mayor's summit. I mean, what a difference, right? What you're able to put your hands on right now in terms of data compared to where we were then. It's very impressive, and everybody's going to be grateful for it. All that said, we read an article just recently in the Times Call about the anticipated loss, I guess, I don't know the other word, of providers nationally that we should anticipate seeing as soon as October, right? As I'm not certain what the rates of spending will be for every provider who's received ARPA funding, but we know that money starts to dry up at the end of September. And the article we saw projected 70,000 providers nationwide, either going out of business, who are going to be dramatically affected by the expenditure, the loss of ARPA funds as a way to subsidize their operations. And I don't know I don't remember I've got the articles at home sitting on my desk, the number of kids and families that are going to be affected. It's going to be devastating to a lot of communities. Do we have any idea in this community of what you've displayed in terms of providers, where we have deserts or not, the ratings and the costs? I mean, the loss of ARPA funding is going to have an effect here like it's had other places, I assume. But I'm curious, can we factor that in? Not in the dashboard now, but in terms of what we should anticipate over the next, say, 6 months in terms of our capacity?
I don't think it has the capability to be able to predict what that loss will be.
Well, I'm
but
not,
it will
I
be
don't
able
think
to
that, I'm
measure.
not looking for the dashboard for that. I'm just based on the work you're doing across the country. Christina, the work, you know, you're in this 24/7 in what's going on nationally and at the state level and then in Boulder County. We ought not to be blindsided by that.
Maybe creating another data point.
Yeah.
I think when you look at ARPA funds, I'm trying to think of what we allocated.
They have time, I know, to get them spent out.
Yeah,
But,
so-
but it's coming, as soon as October.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think what we're gonna have to do is probably, or what they're gonna have to do is probably reach out to these providers and go, who's receiving ARPA funds? You know, I know from the ARPA allocation we have, we really tried to be diligent in understanding what we were funding related to a one-time expense versus an ongoing expense, because we know the danger of that, but we don't know what other agencies have utilized. And so, yeah, I think we're gonna have to reach out and ask that question and let them tell us what they're receiving.
I think it's
Yeah.
data we ought to chase. I saw the number, the average cost, the average cost we saw in one of the slides you went through quickly, of $15,800 and some odd dollars, was that the number?
I believe
Or
so.
it was 1,580 something per month.
Yeah, it was 21% of someone's income.
So rolls up to $18,000, $19,000 a year. That was a Longmont number, right? And includes the entire range from licensed FFNs to licensed centers, right? And in that average, we have some that are way north of $18,000 a year. So I'm just going to reflect one more time. There is a group that was proposing a way to address the costs and building capacity that was denied by Boulder County Commissioners to end up on a ballot, how it would have fared. But I think I don't want to miss the opportunity to say that group has not gone away. That work continues. That group fully intends to take another run at Boulder County Commissioners for the November 24 election cycle, which would make a huge difference. If to add that around this would be game-changing for Longmont and for the rest of Boulder County. Thanks.
Do we need a break to try to fix? Yeah, let's take a break.
5-minute break.
All right.
We'll get It was on SharePoint. It was on SharePoint. But it opens for me on my side.
Where did you see it?
Yeah, right. That's the new link Christina sent.
We are back.
Yes, I just noticed it the other day. I'm like, I saw my neighbor have one. I'm like, oh, I must have one now. They don't even tell you.
Okay, we have the ever elusive map on the screen now, so
Oh.
we'll have Grace go ahead and demo that, and then I'll move through my other items really quickly.
Great. So, as mentioned, there are different facilities plopped on the map for their location. The color corresponds with its QRIS rating. The size corresponds with how many slots it's estimated to have. You can also click on any of the dots. Sorry, I'm trying. I need to remove this layer. And see different care facility information. I had to remove the layers. Okay, so it tells you the name of the facility, the estimated care slots, maximum, minimum slots, the provider name, and its QRIS rating. We have a drop down here for an accessible area. So as mentioned, you can see how much of this is bikeable. 10 minutes covers a lot of the city, as well as drive and walk. What I find to be really interesting is the view census data. So you can add a layer for enrollment for 3 and 4-year-olds, as well as those not enrolled. But in terms of maybe getting a better understanding of who's not getting served, you can do different layers like a Spanish-speaking household or renter-occupied homes. So you can see there's a high concentration of Spanish speakers here, but not a lot of facilities that are available to them. And sometimes if you find the layers a little bit too distracting, like when I was trying to click on the dot to see the name of it, you can just remove those. So it's a little bit clearer, and remove long boundaries as well. And then you also have the option to only view high quality facilities. I don't know if there are any more questions on the map.
Councilor Hidalgo Ferry.
Thank you, Mayor. So this question might be more for Christina. As we look at this data, and, you know, right away I'm looking at, you know, some of our Title I schools, you know, just a lot of our high flyers where we're constantly, as educators, constantly going out to the communities and kind of offering support, and then looking how little neighborhood quality and quality care too. So, you know, that's another thing I wanted to ask you as well. But, you know, looking at these areas, you know, what do you envision as far as, like, for me, when I see that, it's like, okay, well, what could we do, work in that particular area to kind of help support community or get somebody on board to, you know, who could be a good talent or interested in, you know, offering a daycare facility or something to that effect. I guess just what do you envision in doing with this data now that we see this?
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. What I envision is, actually I'll talk about that a little in our next slide, a couple of things. One is a partnership with our housing department in when they are building new developments, how can we have our childcare organizations partner with them to have co-located childcare and housing within their developments. That's one way that I envision getting more resources into the community. And the second piece is through our hub facility. So we have some ideas that we want to go to the community and say, exactly, pose that question. What can we do to help? What kinds of incentives do you need? What kinds of support do you need to open up, whether they're childcare homes to create more spaces, or what kinds of trainings might you need? And I'll talk about that a little in our next slide.
Okay. And then the next one, as, you know, as we pull out all the, you know, just focus on the high rating, you know, you see the number of dots really decrease. So, you know, something that I'd like to see in the future is take a deeper delve with some of the current, you know, what's going on, what kinds of supports could be in place, different trainings or different opportunities for people to expand within these daycare facilities. Because that is crucial too. I mean, we're getting them, so the group that I have this year in my class, my third graders, they were in preschool when COVID hit. And it's really evident in how they interact with each other, the socialization piece. Not so much the academics, but socialization. And that is so key during those years, those formative years, and when they miss that, we saw what happens. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm physically exhausting because I'm rounding up kids. It's quite a scene, but yeah, so how can we delve deeper into that? I'd love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I may have missed this, but I see the legend for the circles and the daycare ratings, but where is the legend for the different shades of red, and what does that mean? Renter occupied units percentage. Thank you.
Yep, and that can be changed to view different census data.
Yeah, got that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay.
So before Christina goes on, you heard me talk about dashboards. What you're seeing is actually Power BI that's creating a lot of this. That's actually what we're using in Becky's group and strategic integration to create similar dashboards for other projects that we have, so that it's very easy to see it, get a sense of status, and understand what we're dealing with.
Great.
Thank you. Now I'll address some of the questions in our next. Let's see if I can get this to full screen, and then I can do this. Perfect. Thank you. Let's use this. It's easier. All right. Now, what I'll talk next is about our carryover funds and how they'll support the Friend Family Neighborhood component of the Early Childhood Hub. So our ideas for this include, but are not limited to, as you talked about, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, training space, options for care outside of normal business hours, using that hub as a central gathering place to access resources, such as recreation, mental health services for young children. And so what we want to do is children, youth, and families, along with community partners, will be engaging with our Friend, Family, Neighbor component of the care system in an early education system reboot. So early education summit reboot, excuse me. And this is really a follow-up from the 2019 summit. And so what we want to do is generate ideas on how to best integrate the FFN component of the system into this early childhood hub prior to it completing its full construction. So what you see in front of you is a rendering of the proposed hub facility. It will have early childhood slots and then classrooms, and then we really want to integrate that FFN piece of care. Any questions about that?
Christina, do you have a proposed site for this?
Yes, it is on 3rd and County line. I don't remember the name of there's another childcare business right on the corner. I can get that.
It's just to the south. It's just to the southeast of the farmhouse apartment development.
Yes,
and,
farmhouse.
And sort of sit back. There used to be a bank back there that's now an existing child care development, and then there's some vacant property that's adjacent to that.
Great.
So we'll be working with Matt Eldred from TLC on the summit reboot, and engaging our FFN partners.
Great. I'm anxious to hear more about that.
Yeah. So in addition to the carryover funds in the CYF budget, other line items that support early childhood initiatives are $25,000 ongoing funds allocated to the 529 Jump program, a program designed to bring awareness to saving for post-secondary education by utilizing a tax-deducting 529 savings account. 200,000 one-time funds allocated to early childhood capacity building, where CYF staff will work with our collaborators to best determine the way to invest these funds in our community. So to your point, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, that it could be in training, it could be in a variety of different ways, but again, we would engage our community and partners in the best way to do that. And then finally, 100,000 in ongoing funds and 200 in one-time funds that were initially directly called out for council and staff, and that are going to be used to assist staff with the cost of childcare. If you'll remember, we did receive a grant from the state for $500,000 to put toward the hub development, and in that we will be able to designate some spots for City of Longmont employees. So it was an employee-based childcare grant. Any questions about any of this?
No, but thank you so much for working so hard on getting our vision where we need it to be.
Thank you. Thank you. So next, we have supporting action for mental health. We know that there's work that must be done in this area. Suicide rates have risen for adults by another 2.6% last year, and that follows an overall 5% increase in suicides since 2021 nationwide. We know that there are mental health impacts in our own community, and we recognize that we need to have a coordinated effort to address them. So staff has learned a great deal via the work that we've done through our neighborhood impact team. This multidisciplinary center of excellence model that the NIT work has undertaken has made a difference not only in providing a safer environment for our community, but also connecting individuals with much needed resources and services. So what we would like to do is take a similar approach with mental health and therapeutic case management that occurs in different divisions across the city. Since the City and Longmont Housing Authority began partnering in 2020, it's become clear that there's a need to support formerly unhoused residents living in the city's supportive housing communities with a more robust level of service to support their successful move into housing and self-sufficiency. So this is critical, particularly for those experiencing mental health challenges. So what we're proposing that this funding, $275,000, be used to hire additional clinicians that would be city employees to support the formerly unhoused and provide high-quality, community-focused, supportive mental health services and therapeutic case management. Creating a mental health impact team like the NIT will allow staff to take a broader citywide, cross-departmental approach to supporting unhoused individuals. This will benefit not only our unhoused community members moving into housing programs, but support employees working in these programs because they'll be working on a multidisciplinary team. And this approach that is collaborative will better support our city in leveraging these collective resources. Any questions about this?
I know that this doesn't have anything, because we're talking about your division in the city, but I also want to know, do we still have mental health workers going with police officers on domestic calls?
That's
Core.
exactly what we're talking about. So leveraging
okay.
resources across the city.
Okay.
So we have clinicians in children, youth, and families, in senior services, and through our public safety department. And we also have case management that takes different forms around the city. And so how can we leverage all of that and take that NIT approach to really provide supportive services for those unhoused people that come to live in LHA properties.
And does that portion of our marijuana tax go toward, thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
So part of what, you hear us talk about Centers for Excellence and cross-functional teams. One of the things that I think we've struggled with as an organization for a significant period of time is that we tended to take things and work it as our own little group. And, what really probably made the biggest difference in how we're working with neighborhoods regarding just general neighborhood issues, but particularly what we were experiencing at Lanyon Park and Carr Park with the unhoused community is we found that when we brought everyone together and we brought the expertise that we needed and the people that really knew how to deal with the issues, we were able to respond more quickly than we have historically in the past. It's a very similar model to what we did when we didn't call it this, but we knew it was this. That's what we did when we pulled in the Housing Authority. This is really taking the same organizational approach of bringing in the people that really know how to deal with these issues, and we actually flip the model on its head to where they start driving what we're doing. It's not people like me or any of us. It's that people that are in the mix and understand it. They actually sit in team lead roles with an executive group that can help them. And they have the ability to go throughout the organization to get the resources they need so we can deal with it. And we think this really has to be the first step. And then in the end, I think that leads to the conversation we're going to have with you all in the broader unhoused conversation is how do we then integrate our other partners into this? Because there's only so much that we can do as a city, but we are also reliant on, the sheriff's department and some other issues. And I think we have to pull that together to deal with this. But it's really about creating a force multiplier within the system that we have so we can take on more.
Okay, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just am wondering, that you sort of answered the question from something Mayor Peck said, that these are using positions that are already in the budget. But I'm getting asked fairly frequently, all right, there's all these hires, but what do they do and where are they? And so is there going to be some kind of an explanation of what percentage of a person is within this department and this department and this department to make the center of excellence?
Yes. In terms of as we build the team out, yes, we'll be able to fully identify who's on the team, where they sit, what they're doing, and related to your question of where they are, we can answer what we do from the clinicians that are in senior service. We can answer what the clinician or what core and lead are doing and where they're going. What this is going to help us do is actually, to the point on metrics and how do you evaluate it, is the whole intent of this is to increase our capacity. So what we're going to be looking at is how are we seeing that increase in capacity? Are we seeing them able to handle more calls? Are we seeing a change in individuals that we're servicing because we can surround them with more layers to what we're trying to do?
Okay, yeah, that's a good partial answer, I think. And I'm thinking that maybe you don't have yet, but you're going to have sort of an overlay org chart.
Correct. We're unlike the neighborhood impact team where it's fully built and we can
Yeah.
tell you this is it. We're on the front end of this process. Part of it is related to the budget because we're asking to use the $275,000 of the marijuana sales tax for the positions that will primarily be at the suites, but also serve other properties and work with the unhoused community. And if council passes this, then yes, we will then develop the chart that shows you where everyone will be.
Okay, good, thank you. And that office at the suites and at Zinnia, like
Yeah.
jointly?
And that's a little bit different because part of the Zinnia project is that they actually have funding, and we funded it in a different way compared to how the suites was funded, in that we were focused on supportive services in that facility as we're building it, so they're gonna have services there. But it's how do we work as a team and not also just having them there, because many of the cases that we deal with at the suites actually occur, the issues we're seeing occur. And so it's not an isolated event to the suites. There's connections outward in the community, so it's how do we get out and work as a team. So people will be working in different areas and engaging with different individuals, but it's about maximizing our capacity. It may be that the person at the suites has the right expertise to deal with an individual we see somewhere else. Well, then someone over here can slide over here, and we're constantly moving to deal with the issues that are hitting us real time.
Very good, thank you.
We're ready.
Okay. So finally, we have human services funding. In 2023, the total human services funding was, and it was allocated as follows. So about $1,018,000 for homelessness, housing stability services, and that was about 41% of the total funding. And then 59% of the funding, $1,450,000, was for human services agency grant funding. In 2024, there'll be a substantial increase for human service agency funding. An additional $179,176 is available for immediate allocation. And then there's it's anticipated that there may be an additional 105. However, as Jim has talked about, this is a pending state property tax legislation that will be on the ballot. So given that, at this point, total HSA funding is $2,648,046. The chart in front of you and in your packet represents staff recommendations for the breakdown of the total set-aside amount of $2.6 million. So $50,000 in family hoteling. What we have heard is that there is a drastic increase of our families that are experiencing homelessness. $200,000 in homeless prevention, $520 in navigation, $60,000 housing focused shelter, and $273 in locally controlled vouchers. $65 for ELDER, and then the totals are broken down in the last two lines. Any questions?
Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Family hoteling is an intriguing number because among the outside the government discussions about causes of homelessness and whether we're talking about people who are sort of, service resistant versus people who fall out of conventional housing but would like to be in it, this family hoteling sounds like it's that second group of people who would really like to be housing and just have lost the ability to maintain housing. So I'm interested if you have other numbers, because we do spend a lot, and then there are independent agencies as well that spend money on homelessness prevention by giving rental assistance and stuff. So do you know how many families there are that require this hoteling service now? Because, we know it's catastrophic if such a family ends up on the street. They lose their children and they lose all their stuff. And, it's not like a solo person ending up on the street. It's a whole different thing.
Right.
So do you have the backing numbers?
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Martin, I don't have the exact numbers. What I do know from speaking with the Our Center is that they have seen a shift in their trend in who they are serving. What they have seen is individuals that are needing longer-term support and not that one-time assistance. And so while I don't have the number of exact increase in families, I have other data that I could provide in terms of number of requests that they're seeing. You know, I believe that that I could possibly through McKinney-Vento, I could look at their numbers as well. I believe that's on the state website. I could pull that for you, actually.
That would be wonderful. It really does impact a lot of policy decisions inside and outside the municipal government.
Let me look at McKinney-Vento and see what's on the state website as well.
Thank you.
And get some more information from our center.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And to that question, what we know is probably the longest list that we have from the Housing Authority standpoint is
Yes.
for family units. And really, you know, Aspen Meadows neighborhood is all that we have. We do have a tax credit application in for family units. I actually had a chance today at the Zinnia groundbreaking to talk to Chaffa representatives about this, because I think what we're seeing, this is where the housing conversation is now touching Health and Human Services, in that when you see the high cost of rents and everything that is in the market, really, even in some cases for those that don't qualify for affordable housing but are in that attainable workforce rental market, it doesn't take much for those individuals to slip. It could be a health issue, you know, things that are a common occurrence for most people. And you just drop one of those items, and then based on the cost of rent, they're not able to afford it. So now you're starting to see where the two items are coming together, and why we're trying to focus on affordable, attainable family housing, because we don't have a lot of that inventory. And what we're also seeing is a lot of what we do have is what they call naturally occurring affordable housing. And what that really means is that's just naturally what's existed in the community. But as we see houses selling for more and more, what we're also seeing is that naturally occurring affordable housing going away. And so now you're seeing all of these things come together as we're trying to get the data and put it to justify it to the state and Chaffa as we're trying to get these projects as to why we need this funding coming into our community.
All right, good, thank you.
Counselor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. In the scheme of things, this is really a small expenditure, but the LDAR team does such important work. Is that $65,000 and one more addition to that team, or it's collateral resources around the existing LDAR team?
It's current funding that was added. I believe this was before I started, but I believe it was added later last year.
It's preserving the funding for LDAR. That was originally.
It was grant funded initially, wasn't
It
it?
was initially grant funded, then the agency that was doing it couldn't do the work anymore. Hope agreed to do it. We dropped in with this amount, and this is preserving that at this point.
Okay, so it's really maintaining the
Right.
capacity that.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much, Christina
Thank you.
and Grace.
Mayor Peck, members of council, I just wanted to make one correction. Christina said that the additional money from the property tax would be $105,000. That's what we put in the communication as well, but I'm being told that's probably a typo, and it should have been $150,000.
Oh, okay.
On the other hand, it's a swag at this point because we don't know what the outcome of the legislation will do. But anyway, we meant that to be 150. That's probably our error, so.
Okay.
That's a good correction.
That's a good correction, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't worry, I'll just keep property appeals.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Okay, so now I think Becky is going to, oops, what's,
What did it do now?
is this no longer the PowerPoint? There we go.
Oh. You and I are hitting it.
All right.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. I'm here with an update on grants and external funding sources. Since we've last spoken, a few things have changed. Most of the basics you already know. The bipartisan infrastructure law includes significant funding for infrastructure projects. We're aggressively pursuing funding through BEAD, and the broadband plan for the state was recently released, so we'll be going through that. We know that Phil has recently helped to obtain some RAISE funding for a large project in collaboration with other stakeholders. So we have several projects under many of these areas, and we continue to monitor those that are coming out continually. We also have, we're currently in the process of applying for the formula grant funding under the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant, which is another BIL program. And we will welcome next week, or I think the week after, first week of October, a fellow under the Department of Energy's Clean Energy Fellows program. So a data analyst who will work with us to make use of information that we have coming out of our more advanced software systems related to the electric utility. So that's how we're doing so far, keeping an eye on things, making progress toward a lot of council's goals. In addition, we talked previously about how the Inflation Reduction Act was primarily resident facing. A lot of those things are tax credits and programs that are available to residents. And so entities that we partner with are starting to come out with more guides and things about how to access that funding. As well, we know that as a government entity, we don't usually get a lot of tax credits, but under the IRA, we are eligible to apply for certain direct pay tax credits. So we're in the process of going through that registration. So that's what we're doing today.
That's the best and shortest update I've heard in a long time.
The final presentation tonight is on public safety and also the Longmont Humane Society, and Zach Artis will be making that.
Mayor Peck, council members, wanted to discuss just a few things, requests for the budgets for 2024 for public safety. In particular, I know that Mr. Goldman went over the new positions, but just want to touch base on what those positions are and how we're looking to use those organizationally. I want to talk about one-time expenses and then also look at the Humane Society contract that is included in this year's budget. For new positions this year, there were 3 firefighters. When we look at where we were as far as our ratio for population, the national average was about 1.5 per 1,000, and we were just under that at about, and so what we do with these additional 3 positions will now put us 1 to 1,000 ratio. Where we're looking to use these is you can look at the calls from 2022 and the calls from 2023. Most of our calls are not fire related. So they're not house fires, they're not those types of things. What they are medical calls. And we currently have a contract with AMR, which provides ambulance services for the city of Longmont. They actually stay in our stations with our firefighters and they work the same shifts. Right now, AMR provides 3 ambulances for the entire city of Longmont. We have supplemented that with what we call an Alpha car, and it is basically an ambulance that says the city of Longmont on it. Currently, we don't do transports. AMR does all the transports for us. But that Alpha unit actually runs those calls also because it has certain equipment on it. Now, moving into 2024, we have an agreement with AMR now to begin to do transports to help because we don't always have 3 ambulances in the city. Sometimes those are sent to other hospitals to do transports. Sometimes they're tied up on medical calls. So what we are proposing is with these 3 firefighters, we are looking to create basically a second Alpha car within the city. So now that gives us the capacity potentially to have 5 ambulances within the city to meet the needs. As we look at the growth of the city and we look at what's coming down the pipeline and some of the projects that have been presented and some of the projects that are actually in the pipeline, we're going to see an increase in our medical calls. And so that's the area that we're focusing in, not necessarily on the fire side as far as fighting fires, but being able to respond to the medical calls and getting folks there very quickly to be able to bring that treatment to individuals and then get them to the areas that they need to go. The other part is the victim advocate. We currently have 3 victim advocates and 1 supervisor. So this is a positions that were actually, they're legislative, meaning the state of Colorado identified X amount of crimes within the state. Usually they're the more serious crimes that occur, where the victim advocate comes along with the victim and then walks them through the process of the case, provides them services and treatments, gives them resources to receive services and treatments. As you can see, we did about 1,500 victims last year that we worked with. And those cases can take anywhere from a year or more to go through. So the cases aren't ended as soon as someone gets arrested or goes to jail. They follow up and let the victim know where the defendant's at, whether or not they've been released, what the status of the case is, along with helping them try to get back to a normal life. We actually provided 5,000, I need to put my glasses back on, but just over, thank you, 5,846 services. That means that these victims just didn't need one service, they needed multiple things, whether it was any type of counseling or any type of different things that we can offer. And so this position, what we're seeing again this year as we move into 2023, meaning going into 2024, we're seeing about a 20% increase. And so that's quite a bit of work that we put on these individuals. This other person will allow us, again, to be able to keep those times and being able to communicate with those victims on a regular time frame. But also one of the things I did not mention, it's not in the slide, our victim advocates actually go out to the scene. So if we have a major crime, they're actually showing up in the middle of the night to meet with victims to start that process right then and there. And this helps share that load of what we're seeing coming in. So before I move to another slide, I just wanted to make sure and see if anybody had any questions in particular about these 2 positions and what the direction is that we're hoping to do. Move forward. Thank you, Mayor Peck. So I was just curious, in my past experience having toured and spoken with administration for UC Health, they had their own ambulance services. Do they not service Longmont and it's collected all within the AMR system? Correct. So the AMR system handles all of the dispatch 911 calls and handles all the transports. They also do the transports for the city of Boulder and also Boulder County. So while UCL does have their own services, they do not provide those 911 services as far as requesting emergency ambulances or services. They do not provide that for the city of Longmont. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
So this also relates to what Mayor Pro Tem was asking. Because we have a contract with AMR, does that reduce the cost to the patient being transported? Because the default bill for AMR seems to be about $2,000 for transport. Does that reduce that at all?
As far as if we begin the transports? No, ma'am, it does not. So AMR still handles all the billing, all the setting, all the fees for that. What we have been able to do contractually is to keep our price down, meaning that when we have a contract, we don't pay any services. We don't pay a fee to AMR to provide the service here because we're subsidizing them with a 4th ambulance. So the AMR doesn't have to put a 4th ambulance in the city, which would require our contract to go up, and now we would be paying. I will tell you, when we approached AMR about a 4th ambulance in the city, the cost was about $500,000.
Oh, my goodness.
So we are actually basically providing a service by using our resources to do this to make sure that our contract stays net neutral.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no other counselor in the queue,
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
move on.
Want to move on to the Smart City Camera Project. This is something that we approached council back in 2002 for the 2023 budget. And so this, essentially what this was is installing digital video cameras in our parks, along with installing those in the LDDA, which just recently happened in the past few months, and then flock cameras, which we would classify as tag readers. So they read the tag of the vehicle. In 2024, what we are hoping to accomplish, I'm sorry, let me back up. As you can see, what we were able to do is we were able to put 38 cameras in city parks. Now, that's not every city park because some city parks have multiple cameras in there depending on the size of the parks. We were able to put 19 cameras down in our Main Street area, in the LDDA area. But in 2024, what we hope to do is expand that program to 16 new city parks and open space areas, along with 7 new cameras for the public safety building as we go through our remodel. Those cameras haven't been updated probably since the building was built.
And then finally, add additional 10 flock cameras across the city. And in just a moment, I'll show you a map of where we currently have those and what we're proposing. And then the new video VMS, which is a video management system, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes on a later slide of why that needs to be replaced and what we're looking to move towards. So as you can see, currently, this is what we currently have. These are the 36 cameras that we have in the parks, from Car Park all the way down to the park facility on Sunset. Then you can also see that we have 19 cameras. Again, we just listed the blocks on there where those cameras are located within the LDDA area. And then those are the location for the 5 flock cameras. What I will tell you is they're not a secret. Ms. Erickson actually puts these on our webpage to show you where these items are and where we have cameras, and she updates them as we go, as we add cameras to the system. So moving for 2024, and let me explain the map, what you're looking at. So what you see is you see a round purple dot with a camera icon in the middle of it. Those are the cameras that are actually located within the parks or LDDA. Now, I will tell you, I did not put 19 cameras right there above the name of Longmont, but that one camera represents all of LDDA cameras. What you do see is a teardrop and maybe kind of a reddish color. Those are actually where our tag readers are at, located throughout the community. What I will tell you is that when we put the first camera up in Lanyon Park, within probably the first week or two, we were able to solve a case immediately based on an assault that occurred. And when officers showed up, the story that we got was completely different than what the video showed. And so we were able to make sure we arrested the right individual and charged them appropriately. Since adding these cameras to the parks, including today, we had an incident that occurred not at the park, but down the street involving a firearm. We were able to identify the suspect, see the suspect with the weapon, and within a matter of minutes, we were able to take him into custody and then later on locate the firearm. So the cameras are saving us hours and hours and hours of detective and investigative times to be able to identify individuals very quickly. As many of you know, and our community knows, we've had some serious incidents that occurred, but it's because of the technology that we've been able to identify the suspects very quickly and take them into custody and then charge them appropriately as we move forward. So I do want to just acknowledge that. What I will also remind, we do not use facial recognition. The video for the cameras themselves are only kept for 14 days and they roll off. We don't keep the camera video, and the tag reader roll off every 30 days. There are about another 60, I think it's 50 or 62 cameras across northern Colorado that other agencies use that we do have access. So recently you may have seen on Facebook where an individual in a yellow Jeep made a left-hand turn and took out a pedestrian. We were able to find that Jeep on our flock cameras and get the information. But before we were able, by the time we did that, he had turned himself in because we were able to get the information out very quickly. So the technology is there. We are using it for the right reasons, and we are using it to get folks into custody and identify them very quickly. So this is the 2024. I apologize for why it shifted like that, but this is the 2024. Again, icons are the same. They're just all black. So if you see a camera icon, that means it's a digital camera. And what those are going in is the parks that you see there on your left. Everything from Union Reserve all the way down to potential other open spaces and parks as we identify based on the calls for service, based on what we're seeing in the community, based on the need. What you can also see is we're looking to add 10 flock cameras to the area. And you can see that from most of those are on Main Street in Camp Pratt that we have. Finally, what I want to talk just briefly on, and Mr. Dominguez may have some comments to make on the LTE network, but the future of what we're doing. So right now, the city has been building out, with the help of Valerie and Nextlight, has been building out its own LTE network. And so that gives us a lot of advantages. Right now, we pay for cellular service for computers and different things that we need to connect back to our RMS systems. And so the LTE network not only gives us a lot of different benefits from not having to pay for air cards for a camera or a variety of different digital things that we use, but we're looking to build it out. So right now, 55 of those cameras that we have are already on that LTE network, which is a huge savings for us. In 2024 and beyond, we want to continue to build that out, that LTE network. And before I move to future considerations, I just want to turn it over to Mr. Dominguez, see if he has anything he wants to say.
Yeah, when we, can you all hear me? Is this better? I can't, I'll try it, okay. Is that better? All right, so when we started looking at how we were going to approach this with the camera system. And frankly, this is a problem that has been plaguing us for almost any time we look at smart city technology and what we need to do, whether it's cameras for the traffic system or for our operations group for snow and ice. The one thing we always ran into is communications. How do we get the information back into the system? So when we started evaluating the camera project and running different numbers on whether it was a Wi-Fi mesh network, the cost just kept coming in really high. So in talking to Valerie, we had this conversation because the LTE networks, there's a system that has moved in that allows different organizations to build their own system. And what we looked at is when we compared that cost versus other existing technology, it was dramatically lower, and you can have so much more opportunity to utilize it. So as we're building this, and as Zach talked about, right now it's for cameras. As we get more coverage in our community, we're going to want to put our RMS systems and our police cars on it. But we can also utilize this for every department within the organization as we're trying to move in and get smarter in what we're doing. So at the end of the day, it's going to give us more capability as we move into more of a true smart city, but it's also going to reduce our costs because we're not having to pay a commercial carrier $50 a month for every SIM card we put in every device. And at the end of the day, when a new technology comes, we're not going to have to worry about communication issues because the communication system has been defined.
I do want to point out, just let me explain the map to you because you may be looking at it going, well, what am I looking at? So the green dots actually represent the actual LTE site location. So if you're familiar riding around and seeing a cell tower, some of them look like trees now, but those that don't typically have 3 antennas on it. And so it's directional. So what you're actually seeing as far as the I guess red or orange color is just go back to the origin point. It's almost like a fan. And so that's the direction that the antenna is facing. That's the coverage area that it has. Okay, so if you actually had one that had the 3 antennas on it, it would actually have almost a 360 coverage. And so that's what you're seeing is it's basically the direction of the LTE or wireless network and where it's headed to. So future considerations, and I had mentioned previously about the VMS or the video management system that we had. So we did go with a vendor last year, and we had a 2-year contract with it. But shortly after going with the vendor, there were some questions raised from our IT department that there were some concerns that it did not meet what was called NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, and it was not compliant. The simplest terms that I can put that I can explain is there are certain Chinese companies that are designated by the federal government that create software or either hardware that deals with cameras and video capturing, and they are on basically a do not use list. And so as that became an issue, we found that potentially some of the software components that we had were involved in that. And so we are in the process this year of replacing those and moving away to a video management system that is actually NDAA compliant. So this is the simplest version I can give you. Right now, we also have a little over 200 traffic cameras across the city. They're on a system that is basically scheduled to go away. And so the goal and plan is to create one video management system that everything goes on. So there is a collaboration between the city as a whole, different departments, to make sure that we're getting a system that works for everyone and that we can get everything on the same platform. And so that has been going on since earlier part of this year when we found out we had some NDA compliant issues to make sure that we're bringing everything onto one piece. That also includes open space as we begin to build that out, but also our city facilities as we begin to upgrade those, making sure that everything is on one format or one platform and using the same cameras, the same systems, and having the access.
So when we talk about it, our river cameras and things like that, so, you know, the example I give to folks is when we had the flood, we had none of this. And so it's like we need to see what's going on, so we had to get somebody to take us up in a helicopter so we could see it. And you all have heard the story, was, you know, trying to call down. This is going to give us the ability to deal with so many different issues, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a public safety issue, the ability to just have a center. Eventually we will have a center where we can respond and really become more efficient and effective in what we do. And the one thing I was going to add, Zach did talk about the impact to their operations, and we've spent some time talking about it. To put it in perspective, when we look at some of the cases they've dealt with, I would say on average, it probably is saving us about 150 hours. And that may be spread across multiple people just on how fast we're able to see and deal with the situation. So everything we hoped it would do, we're seeing that now.
Any questions before I move on to the animal control, or, sorry, Longmont Humane Society? Okay, thank you, Mayor. So finally, want to just touch on the Longmont Humane Society as we move into the budget for 2024. We were approached by the Longmont Humane Society back late part of 2022 regarding our contract moving forward. So we've had a contract with the Humane Society for many years. What the Humane Society provides for us is basically an area to bring our animals to, so that they can be cared for, taken care of, receive medical treatment, and then potentially be returned to the owner or then be adopted out, depending on the circumstances. What we were informed of is that moving forward, the pre-existing model was not working for the Humane Society. It was not financially possible for them to continue to do that and created many challenges, and it was no longer sustainable. So when we were approached in 2022, it was right after the budget had already pretty much been finalized. So we began those conversations in 23. We were reapproached early part of 2023 for additional funding of $475,000. As council may remember, it was brought back sometime about midsummer and asked for that funding to be added. We were able to get that and bring that up to $475,000. So moving into 2024, they are requesting $734,000 and $747. And what we're expecting and what conversations are already started is there's an expectation of probably somewhere beginning around $838,000 moving into 2025, and we expect that to be escalated every year. And so staff is working to try to understand the cost, trying to understand how is Longmont being billed. Are we being billed for our animals? Are we being billed for animals outside of our agency? And as you saw, there were some questions about the percentage that we were being billed that were not Longmont animals. And so again, this is still a process that we're working through to try to understand and try to get to a true number and what that looks like moving forward. So we can keep this partnership that we've had for almost 50 years.
So I'm going to jump in on this one. So obviously individuals have come and talked to council about this item. They've been at public invited to be heard. One of the things when we started talking to them, from the very beginning, once we started understanding their situation, so obviously I think they were impacted by donations going down. I mean, we saw that in a lot of nonprofits. And so when we started having the conversation, the point that we really took is that we need to pay, if there's a cost that we can attribute to Longmont, we need to pay that cost. Mm-hmm. And so inherently, that's been the question, is what's the cost? We've been able to really look at the data, understand some issues. We had a really productive meeting with the Longmont Humane Society, two of their board members and their executive director. We did point out what we were seeing in terms of data that didn't make sense to us. But as we started talking about 2024, one of the things that we realized is we need a place to take animals. Mm-hmm. And we were starting to run a number of different options to see what would we do if something significant happened. Based on the conversation that we had with them and the progress that we've made, and this is, let me back up, a number of humane societies are struggling with this issue. The Weld County Humane Society, I think, just merged with the Larimer County Humane Society. This is not unique. Mm-hmm. And so when we had the conversation, I think there was, we all agreed that we needed to look at the data to really understand, where are the animals coming from and what is the cost associated with the agencies and or individuals. And based on that conversation and our agreement to continue working that for future years, I do think we need to, with the additional funding that we have plugged in this budget, I believe it was a 500 and, how much is it, Jim? 570,000. I do recommend that we probably, to council, that we move forward with that because we need a place to deal with our animals next year. The thing that did come out is one of the things that we're going to do and that I'm going to personally do is actually convene a meeting with the other agencies that utilize the Longmont Humane Society and really talk about what we all need to do to come to the table, because they work with Frederick, they work with Firestone, they work with Meade, they work with Boulder County, and I think all governments that utilize the Humane Society have a responsibility to help with this situation. And so at the end of the meeting, we agreed that yes, we need to refine the data, we need to figure out what is really the cost of Longmont. And the second piece was that I would convene a meeting with the other governmental agencies to start talking through this, and hopefully by then we'll have the data that really we can point to them and say, this is what you're bringing into the system, so we can get a really good accounting of all of this.
So Harold, if we put, I agree with you, we need to up our ante there, with the Humane Society, but you're still going through the process of figuring out where the errors were, where we could trim it down, et cetera. So are we committing the extra $500,000 immediately? Or are you gonna wait until you have this process, that you've gone through the whole thing?
So I think because there's so many governmental entities that are involved in this, I think for next year we need to put it into the contract for next year. One of the things that we talked about is agreeing to another section in the contract that really outlines everything that we're going to do to refine the numbers and what that looks like, and convene the other agencies that are part of this, and then that'll actually inform the numbers for 2024.
Okay.
I will tell you that, you know, when we've run the numbers and when we start getting closer to it, well, just what we've seen. So what we've seen in some of the numbers to your question is certain animals that were attributed to another community were allocated to us. I mean, so we've seen enough that, and I think we all agree that we're going to work through this, that unless we see a significant spike this year, I think my gut tells me it's probably close to where we are. But definitely refine the numbers. But this is only a 1-year commitment until we get the data.
Right, because we really need to know what their operating budget is before we sign a contract. If we don't know, I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Correct, and those are things that we're talking about, is we need to understand what your expenses are, what your revenues are. In the negotiation, I've also, based on the numbers and the amount that we're contributing, similar to the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, where we put about, $450,000 into that. I did also say, can we get a position on the board? Because we are starting to get in with some significant dollars going into this operation. And so that's more that we have to negotiate, but I think first and foremost is we have to get the data down and understand what really is coming in and who's it coming from.
Yes. Thank you for all your work on the SAC. I know you've been working on it a long time.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions before I step away? Oh, there you go, sir. Sorry.
Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Mayor, members of council, finally, I'm just going to tell you that next week is our final presentations on the 24 proposed budget, and this is what we have planned at this point. Is we need to go through some pay plan changes or corrections that we've found since the plan has been released. We're going to discuss property tax, which we have pushed off for you as long as we possibly could, but we'll bring back to you the implications that we need to deal with, and what our plan would be to try to deal with that as the information becomes available to us. And then financial policies and any changes there will be discussed. And finally, we also will have our first public hearing on the budget. Following week at the study session, we'll be asking you to give us any final direction for the 24 budget so that we can put that together to bring all the ordinances that are necessary for first reading on October 10th. Is there anything that we have not discussed that you still want to hear about that we can add to next week's meeting? Last call.
I know what I want you to look at for next year. I would like to have some kind of cost analysis on how we could get a drone fireworks show in Longmont. And maybe have some one-time funding toward that
So you said that for next,
for this July 2024. This budget, no, I went 2024. Next.
I hear you, I understand the timing. Now, I don't think we'll be able to come in next week with information.
no.
But as you know, depending on the outcome of HH, we will have some undesignated one-time money, so we can,
Well, as you look at one-time funding, I want to keep that in our thought process.
all right, so that's it.
I see no one else in the queue, and
All right, thank you.
no, thank you. This is really interesting and good. Looks like that's our agenda. Yeah, we got to do the STEAM thing. Where's my?
How many lows would Rob Lowe rob if Rob Lowe did Rob Lowe?
Shut up. So we're now at this presentation of the Sugar Factory and Steam Sub-Area Plan.
Take a deep breath. There's some snacks in your.
Oh, snacks.
The bottom drawer.
Bottom drawer.
Everybody's waiting for this.
Hello. So we have our planning department here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know you all been waiting for this.
I
So
have, breathless, yes.
We will speed things up and get right to it because I think you're pretty familiar with the Sugar Factory and Steam sub-area plan. I'm Glenn Vandenwagen, I'm the planning director, and to my left is Tony Chacon, our redevelopment manager. So we started out this process, I think the end of 2021, when we hired Stantec Consulting. We convinced council that you've done some great planning work, but maybe we need some kind of umbrella plan to kind of pull it all together. So we definitely want to incorporate, and this is the area, Steam and Sugar Factory. They do touch, but they're related and unrelated in a lot of different ways. But we felt we wanted to spend some time on the past planning that has been done. One of that example of that is the corridor study, but also Envision Longmont realizes that in the Sugar Factory area, we have a redevelopment area and we have a big hole in it, and that's the Sugar Factory itself, which is not annexed. So we need to do additional planning and hopefully incorporate that area into the urban renewal area. But we wanted to learn what the community wants and talk to the landowners, identify all those issues and opportunities with this area, and then identify what some of the tools are to helpfully see an evolution of these two areas into goals of the community. So are we on time? No, we are not. We are about a year late. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is we've had some real detrimental staffing changes with the kind of leadership of this plan.
So it was kind of taken over by the two folks sitting at this table. We worked with staff and we did finish with the consultant, but we took it up because we had a number of developers that were now interested in doing things in these two areas. So we didn't want to make a plan that didn't meet their vision as well. So I think it was time well spent. We were on budget, I will say that. So we didn't spend more money, but definitely the process has taken longer than we hoped for. Pushing the wrong buttons here. So going back to June of, I think, 2019, the council implemented a visioning process for the STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and makerspace. I believe I got all the initials in the acronym correct. To look at hotel, conference center, performing arts center, and education facility and how it may link into our downtown where we have a transit center already planned. I think there was a number of plans. I wasn't part of that process. I don't know if Tony was, but certainly a number of the council were. I think this was the preferred plan. But I think what we ended up with the sub-area plan supports a lot of the goals that this process. And then a year later, we had an opportunity with Urban Land Institute and their technical advisory panel to take a quick charrette-style look at the sugar factory. So they had an environmental planner, they had a couple of developers, they had an urban designer, an architect, I believe a landscape architect, and I think the sustainability director from CSU was also involved with an economist. They looked at all the different issues in the sugar factory area, and they came up with 3 kind of land use alternatives with that process. With the sub-area plan, we initiated a very intensive outreach program that included survey data, questions out on Envision Longmont. We went to various events. In the lower left-hand corner was from Sample on the Slope event, where we asked folks, what would you like to see in this area? In the center of this slide is some survey results of the question from Stantec. At that point, they were talking about a cultural hub in the sugar factory, or the STEAM, or in both areas. So this basic question is, what kind of uses do you see in a cultural entertainment hub? And I'll just point out the bottom 2 is a live music venue or a performing arts center. So I think we're moving towards that goal as well. And my favorite part of the whole process was working with the 3rd graders, with Indian Peak School, and their teacher is here on council, Susie Hidalgo Faring. A process was run by Growing Up Boulder, where these kids really tore into creating a great plan for the sugar factory. We had the developer was involved, Charlie Woolley. You saw his presentation a few weeks ago. And just some real great dynamic ideas. I think all of them had a underwater Ferris wheel, which is awesome. I can't wait. Charlie committed to building that. But you know, it's amazing. I probably overlooked these kids, but they mentioned we need daycare, we need affordable housing, all the things on your columns on your goals. So a pretty fun process. So I'll turn it over to Tony. He'll talk a little bit about the challenge, opportunities, and the recommendations that came out of the plan. Also, I forgot to mention, and I didn't even pick it up here, we had a number of CU planning students that also looked at the sugar factory, but the 3rd graders beat them out, I'm sorry. But anyhow, we need planners, so send those kids our way.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So
in the plan, I'm just going to highlight some of the high-level elements that were brought up and to be addressed in further endeavors as we move forward as development were to proceed and such. So first of all, barriers. I think you all got a good sense of some of the barriers on your tour. I believe you did take the tour. So that was probably the more immediate and the most costly barrier that we have is the remediation associated with the property and the cleanup. Rail tracks and the sewer treatment plant in the Sugar Factory area pose somewhat of a challenge. You know, the question being is what's the most appropriate land uses in proximity, and or how do you address buffers between various types of uses and such. And then a few of the other ones, there are, I'm sure, development standards. There are a lot of constraints within our current code requirements, whether it be zoning or our actual design criteria that are considered barriers to getting some redevelopment done in the area. And then a couple other ones is, of course, infrastructure. There's virtually none out there at the sugar mill. And then also there's some mining operations that still can be conducted in that particular area. And then also a potential wetlands issue that has to be addressed. So on the STEAM side, the connectivity to downtown, and I think we all know a lot of these issues as we worked through the visioning process, but effectively right now there is no north-south movement between Main Street and Martin, so the plan does address those particular issues. Environmental concerns, potential environmental concerns. So we don't know what's actually out there right now as compared to the sugar mill where we know what conditions we have. But we anticipate there are certain conditions that will have to be remediated as development proceeds in that area. One of the most probably the biggest challenges in STEAM is potential assemblage of properties because it has a lot more smaller properties. And so you have to bring a number together to make it a viable development project. And so that's probably the most significant obstacle to STEAM right now. It used to be the floodplain, but the floodplain issue has been remedied, so we're no longer worried about that. Oh, I've got it, sorry. There are some opportunities that we need, the plan talks about taking advantage of. And through that, of course, restoration of the historic buildings. And just to let you know, contrary to what you might see out there, some of those buildings can actually be restored relatively easily by virtue of the construction methodology that's in place on them. So they're all effectively steel frame, and the brick walls really have no structural value to them. You can actually just rip them down and build them back up. So that's a really great opportunity because a lot of older buildings, the walls themselves are the structural elements, which is a real challenge to get them repaired. There's some open space assets. Of course, the city owns all the property south of the rail tracks in that vicinity there. So there's great opportunity to figure out how we provide that connectivity through the development. Of course, the large development parcels, railroad and trail enhancements. So the plan actually talks about what can be done in relation to the railroad storage tracks. They're not actually active tracks per se. They're just used to store their cars that aren't being utilized. And then also the trail is how do we, again, the connectivity back to the St. Vrain Trail system. And then we do, as was mentioned by Glenn, is the potential to create or bring that property in as an urban renewal district, which gives us access to revenue generation that then in turn can be reinvested to get through some of these obstacles that we're seeing in the sugar mill area. STEAM, again, downtown connectivity. We're looking at our plan, the vision. We did incorporate Emery Street, for example, which was actually in the original visioning document for STEAM, because that's an important connection through into downtown. City owns some land out there that can be incorporated into some of the developments. That's one major difference between STEAM and the sugar mill. The city doesn't own any land in the sugar mill area. And then transit and the multimodal facilities are going to be built in immediate proximity to the STEAM area. So how we provide that connectivity to the transit facilities and then build development around the transit facility, so we have development on both the east and west side of Main Street there. And just to let you know, that particular area is already within an urban renewal district. All we would have to do is amend the plan to pursue tax increment capability within that area. So there's not as much of a process involved to capture that TIF. So the plan talks about some financial tools to assist in the development of both areas. Of course, number one is private equity and or financing. So regardless of what the Urban Renewal Authority or city would put into the project, it basically will leverage significant higher amounts of private investment. And I think that's an important element in the plan. It talks about using the public resources as a means to leverage the private financing. There is talk in both areas about a creation of a special district, whether it be a metro district, GID, that is to be determined, but the intent is to use that district to assist in the installation of infrastructure. And that's important because no one property owner can necessarily afford to put all the infrastructure in on the front end of the development. So we need a mechanism where it can be shared across the board with all property owners. And then the Urban Renewal Authority tax increment funding or financing will be a critical element in both redevelopment in both areas, and so the plan explicitly explains that. And then the last source we've identified is state and federal funding sources, grants and or loan programs that are out there that could assist in some of the redevelopment of this area. And then I did mention our codes and how they have some potential impact. And to just give you a list of some of the more significant ones here. Most probably the most significant one as it pertains to the sugar mill is the zoning of the property. And currently the most appropriate zoning references housing as a secondary use to other uses. And so that element needs either defining to open it up for more housing or to actually eliminate that requirement as part of the zoning code. So that's a potential obstacle for the sugar mill. It's not so much an obstacle for the STEAM area. Height restrictions. We've had some of the development community reach out to us asking if they can go higher than what's allowed per current zoning or code. And that would allow us to get higher densities in some of these locations by allowing for higher heights. One to throw in too is the plan also talks about minimum height requirements in some of these areas too. So especially in the STEAM area where the concern being single-story buildings where it may be more appropriate for taller buildings to be built. Parking requirements, you most probably hear this all the time, but that could pose a challenge. One thing we're trying to avoid is large seas of surface parking, which I believe council is still asking staff to pursue. And then allowance for consolidation of public spaces and storm drainage facilities. So right now under the code, as a development comes in, they have to set aside so much land for like a plaza or a park, and it just makes more sense when you're doing the larger redevelopments per this plan, that if we can consolidate those into a more meaningful public space, that would be one of the goals. And then the modification of street design standards, primarily I note narrower, but it's all about the pedestrian experience more than anything. And so our current design criteria doesn't necessarily support that pedestrian safety issue and utilization issue. So again, these are just some of the elements in the plan that it talks about or recommends to the city council.
And I just want to show you an example of how the additional time did work out well. On the left is, we were going down a road of pretty detailed land use planning for the sugar factory area. Then we start working with Charlie. Willie has a much different vision, which is the one on the right. And so Tony actually worked with the original plan to get something that identifies the circulation as being very similar, but the land uses are really dictated by intensity. So it gives us the flexibility to work with a vision of a developer if it matches our vision as well. So this was something we were able to do in that additional 1 year time. So with that, Council, we'd be happy to answer any questions. We have not put this on an agenda for your acceptance, so we're asking 3 options. You're used to either approve as you see it tonight, or direct us to make some changes, or don't direct us to bring it forward. I will tell you that on, I think it was August 16th, we did a final presentation with our Planning and Zoning Commission, and they did recommend approval of what you see tonight. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Councilor Hidalgo Ferry.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do have a question. There looked like there was a lot of modifications that will need to happen. If we move this forward to place on a future agenda, do we need to be looking at those modifications at the same time? Is this something that we can look at, can approve and revise later? I was just wondering if it has to happen before we bring this plan forward.
No, the recommendations that Tony went through are just that. They're recommendations. So we'd have to come back to you with code amendments. Some of them are actually out of our Public Works manual when it talks about street improvements, that sort of thing. I know that's an effort they're working on, but certainly the zoning changes to height, yeah, we would have to go through a process and bring it back to council.
Okay, and it's not, we don't have to make those changes prior to bringing this plan back forward to us?
No.
I see it now, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Peck. This is something that we know we're going to be asked. If we change height restrictions for zoning in this area, they would not have to automatically be applied to points west, correct? They could be south, for this particular area, which has a different design scheme than the rest of the city.
Right, there is ways to do that. You're absolutely right. And we've thought through a few. One might be an overlay district that's in these 2 specific areas. You could also do it with a planned unit development to raise the height.
Or more than one planned unit development.
Or more than one.
Correct.
Right, so there are ways of doing that without it being citywide.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Waters.
Just one observation, and then I'm going to make a motion. I read this morning a piece in the Times Call. It was a guest opinion offering to the public to vote for the redevelopment project in order to get a performing Center for Arts and Entertainment. You may have read the same piece.
I think so, yeah.
It presented these as one project, that if the vote would be for the redevelopment, and with that vote, you'd also get a Center for Arts and Entertainment. That's the way the article read. I just want to make it clear to whoever, and nobody's listening except the people in this room and maybe the Times Call reporter or the Longmont leader, that was in error, that these are separate projects. There is no public vote, at least not now, on anything related to this, unless it moves forward and you create special districts in which the property owners would then be voting to tax themselves, not other people. Correct?
Yeah, so the funding mechanisms we identified could be utilized towards assisting in the construction of that facility, actually in either of those two areas there. So
In both STEAM and the,
both
both
STEAM,
sub areas.
because one thing we're trying to decide, or as part, the next steps we'll be determining, do we have them as separate urban renewal districts, or do we just have them as one large urban renewal districts with different TIF areas?
But neither of them, moving forward on either of those has nothing to do with what's on the ballot this
No, no, the sources that have been identified in the plan have nothing to do with tax increase, other than the metro district, which would be specific to
Down the
that
road,
district
yeah.
area.
I'm gonna move that we direct staff to place this plan on a future agenda for acceptance as presented.
Thank you. So Counselor Waters moved that we place the, what did you call this whole thing? It wasn't just the steam, but it is
Sugar
the sugar
factory,
mill
steam,
factory, steam
sub-area
area. The steamer factory? On the-
Just don't say sugar mill. That's a no-no.
And it was seconded by Counselor Martin. Is there any discussion? I do want to say on the code changes, though, for me, this is a big deal, and I agree with what Counselor Martin said about making sure that we do not make this a universal code for every developer that comes into this city, says you did it for them. Unintended consequences of what we do really come back to bite us. What usually happens is that you present and ask for the code changes, and then we have to vote on it that night or give direction. I would like us to talk about the codes changes and not vote on it that night. Yeah.
This would be, if we brought anything back, would be the
On a
zero reading concept to get feedback.
That would be great, because we need to really process this. It's a huge deal.
Yep.
So, any other comments? No? Let's vote. You have to change. I know. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. This is actually quite exciting. I do have a question, though, for you, and it had to do with that railroad, and I think it was the Southwestern Railroad or the Western Railroad Company, that track that's out there.
The Omni?
I don't know. I thought it was the,
The Northwest Rail that you were talking
no,
about?
no,
and
no, the rail that's going out in the Sugar Mill area, the track that's out there.
It's like Great Western, isn't it?
Great Western, that's what I was
There's
thinking.
two tracks.
It's actually,
Oh, there are.
there's a group called Omni.
Oh, I didn't know that, so I
There's
didn't.
Omni Tracks, which is actually a subsidy of Bro Development.
Ah,
They-
okay.
They had bought up tracks around the United States, surplus tracks, to use in conjunction with their development interests.
Ah. Well, the reason I'm asking is that the Front Range Passenger Rail, no, I'm sorry, the Northwest Corridor Rail, you probably know what I'm going to ask. Regardless, either at the Longmont end or the Union Station end, needs a maintenance station, especially if there are batteries to charge overnight, or just maintenance. And is there still a conversation about that happening there? With possibly a platform as a stop?
Well, yeah, so there's some land north of Sugar Mill Road between Rogers and Sugar Mill Road, where RTD has indicated that's their preferred location. My understanding, though, is they have not initiated any actions or discussions with the property owners regarding acquisition of that property. So we'll have to see what happens in the future.
Okay.
Well, I just was going to add that also they're looking out in Loveland, too, for that facility.
That would be for Front Range Passenger Rail, not for the Northwest Corridor Rail.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we would need two maintenance facilities, one in each place, more than likely.
Right.
Yeah, and if the facility were to go at that location, they've also talked about potential for a platform there in conjunction with that, too, because it just makes sense to do that.
It sure does. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're still talking.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it for our study session items. Do we have any mayor and council comments?
Are you going to mention Zinnia?
I am.
Okay, go for it.
Are you going to mention
I was going
Roosevelt?
to, but, oh, no.
Counselor Waters. We're having our own conversation.
Yeah, I know, sorry. We're figuring things out over here.
So just some questions, I want to real quick for Jim and for Harold. Just because I want to ask these questions to clarify some, and help my understanding based on some things I heard earlier tonight. The 2024 budget's going to reflect how we're going to spend $444 million of tax dollars, of public money, right, in 2024. That's a 7% increase over the $414 million budget we approved for 2023. How much of that increase is a result of taxes this council increased or raised?
None of it's
None of it.
taxes.
Which
increase.
taxes does this city council have the authority to increase on its own?
None.
Which taxes did the last council have any authority to increase on its own?
None.
We heard from Kimberly McKee tonight about increases to the LDDA budget based on TIF financing and whatever that is going to happen with their assessed valuation. Who decides who pays property taxes in LDDA in that jurisdiction?
Well, it's based on the fact that they're within the jurisdiction, but how much is based on their valuations, which is, of course,
But
separate.
who decides that that is a tax that's going to be applied to those property owners? To create that district and tax and levy a property tax, was that not a result of the business owners or property owners in that footprint?
Yeah, the property owners, you're taxing my mind here.
It's not, I'm not trying to, it's not a trick here.
Well, the city council did have to take an action to create the downtown development
But
authority.
the taxing, what was, the decision to increase taxes was a result of a vote approved by the property owners.
I believe that probably is true. Councilman Waters, that was pre-Tabor though, so I'd have to double check it.
Utility fees for electricity and water, solid waste removal, those go up because?
Well, because of capital improvements, inflation increases, compensation.
Wholesale cost of energy, cost of treating the
Yeah.
water, cost of
Right.
moving the solid waste, right? Now, those fees have gone up.
Correct.
But it's a direct reflection of the cost of doing business. That's not a tax increase. That we do get a chance to approve that, but fee increases. Nonprofit organizations like the Humane Society have benefited from, not the largesse, but it's the city's commitment to reinvest in the city.
Right.
When I came on the council, I think our Housing and Human Services grants, I think were like $700,000. We've got a couple of other council members who were still on the council at that time. We're going to approve a budget of 1.25 million? 1.4 million in housing and human service grants. Double what we reinvested in the community in 2018 or 19 was my first budget cycle. We're going to double that in terms of reinvestment in the community because of additional revenues and what we committed to as a council a number of years ago. Under the Tabor Amendment, or under Tabor, it's no longer amendment, what taxes do we have the authority ever to increase without approval from the voters?
None currently. If you had a property tax authorized and not levied, you would have the ability to levy it. So, but currently you don't
But it
have any
requires
that's
the
not
authorization from the public.
levied. Right.
Correct.
Right.
So I heard tonight somebody advise me to brush up on how we budget and where the money comes from. And shamed this council, at least of what I heard, for raising taxes. I just want to say, I think I'm pretty brushed up on how we build budgets and where the money comes from. And when somebody comes and wants to give misinformation to the public about how that happens, my advice is for that person to go back and brush up on their own facts about how we build budgets and what the authority is for this council versus what we give the public a chance to do, and that is they decide. We've got items on this ballot in the fall. We're not deciding to raise taxes. If it's worthy for the public to see those investments, we'll do it, but based on what the public directs us or allows us to do, not based on what decisions we've made. I hope, Matt, you're listening. And some of that shows up in what happens in the public media, or public newspaper. Thank you.
Councilor Hidalgo Fearing.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention earlier today, I had the opportunity, it just worked good with my schedule, to head over to the Zinnia Permanent Supportive Housing groundbreaking this morning. And it was amazing. And, you know, I think being a part of it from the inception, coming up with the ideas, doing the research, you know, going to the Dolores Project and viewing those, what other municipalities are doing to support their unhoused community. And I think about, you know, again, you know, putting it on the free market, putting it on, you know, private people to cover these things. When we invest in our own community and we invest our dollars to support the most vulnerable populations, we all benefit. Public safety, you know, the crime rate goes down, drug addiction goes down, because we have those services in place. 2013, and I've been very open about it, my daughter overdosed. And there was nothing here for us to turn to. We felt so isolated and alone. And to see now how much we've progressed through the years with changing even how we do policing, with CORE, with our leads teams. We have done so much, we've done so much around providing those wraparound services. And it benefits all of us. It benefits our future. And, you know, and I'm looking at, you know, the funding sources for Zinnia. I mean, we played a portion of the funding, but it also, LIHTC, CDGB, you know, CDBG. Thank you. I was on a roll. And, you know, so we have these different funding mechanisms that come in, these grant sources. If we don't take up on those grant sources, they go somewhere else. They'll go to another community and benefit that community. So, you know, kudos to our staff for going out there and acquiring these fundings and grants so we can have these opportunities that benefit the community as a whole. And, yeah, so so I was really excited and very honored to be a part of that and got to throw some dirt on the, on the little mound. So thank you for including me.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you, Councilmember Waters. I couldn't have said it better. And just to tag on to what you were saying before, that same individual implied that the taxes were only collected by Longmont citizens and not people coming in using the pillow tax, not people coming in that are coming in from outside of our community to use Costco or Sam's or any one of the other ones. It's darn right insulting. And they do need to do a little bit of brushing up. You know, these national issues are not what are the issues of Longmont, and they need to stop doing that now.
So I was at the Xenia groundbreaking as well, and I was very proud of Longmont. And I told Harold that and the team for what they've done. The work that you've put into this is amazing, as well as this council. We've been talking about this since, 2019? And it is a big deal, and it's really difficult to figure out how to put all those partners together. Element, CDBG, HG, Grant. And I also was very happy to see that we were partnering with Boulder County. That, I know that we did on the Spoke, but not nearly as much or in depth as detail as we did on Xenia project. And that is a huge step forward for Longmont and for Boulder County. I've never seen them partner with us on a combined project like that. So that's huge. But I also, Harold, just off the top of your head, because I'm hearing that we have a $444 million budget, how much of that, right off the top, is for basic services? No, just a ballpark. I don't want anything detailed.
Jim?
No, can I say
We will get you that number because we want to make sure that it's accurate because, you know, when you, all of it, if you look at the item that we attached in terms of our level 1 expenses, our level
Right.
2 and level 3, and you look at the positions that we've added and we said, well, what does it get to? Utilizing the council graphic. Almost all of them had a touch to core services that we have to do.
They do.
And so when you look at that, you know, distill capital down into this. And so we will have that slide for you. We'll combine the numbers that we have, but coming up with it off the top of my head is tough. But, you know, when you I think the number we use, Jim, for just our general fund, 75% of that is yeah, so 70% of our general fund is staffing.
Okay.
And so when you look at that general fund number and what really comes in, I mean, that's the folks that are doing the work on a daily basis, that are out in there, you know, filling potholes, providing services via our social service platforms, that are police and fire that are out on a daily basis. And so it's hard because it's easy there to go 70%,
It's all
but other
integrated.
is really capital intensive. But to the point that all of you have made, when I look at the LPC budget, the majority of that budget is actually purchase power.
Right.
And then when you look at how much of it is actually what we're putting in, and the thing I've been talking about on the housing authority side is everything that people are experiencing with inflation, we're experiencing the same thing, and in many areas it's worse because when you start looking at steel, concrete, fuel, and those things, those areas have really accelerated. So we can pull that together
Just
for
a
you.
percentage would be fine, because for me, it's very frustrating when they hear that our tax revenues have increased X percentage over last year, or we have 40, where is that money going? And I would just like to say, 80% of it goes to taking care of the city, period.
Well, I think everything in our
Well, I agree, but some of it's one-time spending, some of it is capital improvement projects that aren't going to happen for a while.
I mean, all of it in there is taking care of our city, whether it's accumulating the dollars we need for Nelson Flanders, whether it's our water line replacement, our electric line replacement. I would say all of it's there, and so we'll give you a really good graph to use to answer that question.
I'm sorry to put you through that, but, you know, sometimes you have to get down to the granular graphic level with people. So, thank you. Counselor Yarbrough.
Thanks. Mayor, I just want, when you were asking that question and to piggyback off of Council Waters, before I ever imagined being on city council, I was on the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. And when we had those applications, we probably had about 40 applications at that time. Now, it's around 70. So although we have 1.4 million plus to allocate for nonprofits and providing services for our community organizations, it's up to 2 million. Over $2 million organizations are asking for.
Right.
So there are needs out there in our community, and it's rising every year. So the needs are there, and so that's why we have these increases, so that we can provide and supply the needs for our organizations who are actually out there doing the work.
Correct.
The one thing I will tell you, so if you remember early in the budget presentation, I made the comment, I've had departments go, they're just now getting to 2008 staffing levels. In many areas, we're still trying to recover from what occurred and deal with these issues, and fund things like the Affordable Housing Fund, the Attainable Housing Fund, and all of these things that really go directly to the residents of our community and support the businesses of our community, because they're also saying, we need these things so that we can be strong as an economic engine of the community. So we'll talk through that, you know, when we have to bring the budget to you to adopt.
I think we've all talked a lot tonight, so, City Manager, do you have anything more to say?
Mayor, Council.
City Attorney,
No comments, Mayor?
can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?